across the political spectrum on advancing that policy, I really figured out who was willing to deviate from their talking points when the door was closed and who wasn't. And it takes some courage to do that, especially without surety that it would actually get done. Especially if they've campaigned on something that was slightly different. And, not everyone has that courage. So through tax cuts, I learned the people who did have that courage. And I went back to that well time and time again on policies that I thought were important. Some were bipartisan. The Great American Outdoors Act is something, it's incredible policy.
I love that one.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the largest pieces of conservation legislation since the national park system was created. And, over 300 million people visit our national parks, the vast majority of them being Americans every year. So this is something that is real and beneficial for people's lives, getting rid of the deferred maintenance, permanently funding them. But there are other issues like that just weren't being prioritized. Modernizing Perkins CTE, and vocational education. And it's something I became super passionate about. And help lead the charge on. I think in America for a really long period of time, we've really believed that education stops when you leave high school or college. And that is not true, and that's a dangerous way to think. So how can we both galvanize the private sector to ensure that they continue to train workers for the jobs they know are coming, and how they train their existing workers into the new jobs with robotics or machinery or new technologies that are coming down the pike. So galvanizing the private sector to join us in that effort. So whether it's the legislative side, like the actual legislation of Perkins CT, which was focused on vocational education, or whether it's the ability to use the White House to galvanize the private sector. We got over 16 million commitments from the private sector to retrain or reskill workers into the jobs of tomorrow.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of education that you helped on. Access to STEM, computer science education. And so the CT thing you're mentioning, modernizing career and technical education, that's millions of people. Mm. The act provided nearly $1.3 billion annually to more than 13 million students to better align the employer needs and all that kind of stuff. Very large scale policies that help a lot of people. It's fascinating.
Education often isn't like the bright, shiny object everyone's running towards. So one of the hard things in politics, when there's something that is good policy, sometimes it has no momentum because it doesn't have a cheerleader. So where are areas of good policy that you can literally just carry across the finish line? Because people tend to run towards what's the news of the day, sort of to try to address whatever issues being talked about on the front pages of papers. And there's so many issues that need to be addressed. And, education is one of them that's just under prioritized. Human trafficking. That's an issue that I didn't go to the White House thinking I would work on, but you hear a story of a survivor and you can't not want to eradicate one of the greatest evils that the mind can even imagine. The trafficking of people, the exploitation of children. And I think for so many, they assume that this is a problem that doesn't happen on our shores. It's something that you may experience at far-flung destinations across the world, but it's happening there and it's happening here as well. And so through a coalition of people that on both sides of the aisle that I came to trust and to work well with, we were able to get legislation, which the president signed, passed 9 pieces of legislation combating trafficking at home and abroad and digital exploitation of children.
How much of a toll does that take, seeing all the problems in the world at such a large scale, the immensity of it all? Was that hard to walk around with that, just knowing how much suffering there is in the world? As you're trying to help all of it, as you're trying to design government policies to help all of that, it's also a very visceral recognition that there is suffering in the world.
Yeah.
How difficult is that to walk around with?
You feel it intensely. You know, we were just talking about human trafficking. I mean, you don't design these policies in the absence of the input of survivors themselves. So you hear their stories. Remember a woman who was really influential in my thinking, Andrea Hipwell, who she was in college where she was lured out by a guy she thought was a good guy, started dating him. He gets her hooked on drugs, convinces her to drop out of college, and spends the next 5 years selling her. She only got out when she was arrested. And all too often that's happening too, that the victim's being targeted, not the perpetrator. So we did a lot with DOJ around changing that. And but now she's helping other survivors get skills and job training and the therapeutic interventions they need. But you speak with people like Andrea and so many others, and I mean, you can't not, your heart gets seized by it, and it's both, it's motivating and it's hard. It's really hard.
I was just talking to a brain surgeon. Main he has to do, he knows the chances are very low of success, and he says that wears at his armor.
Yeah.
It chips away. It's like only so many times can you do that.
And thank God he's doing it, because I bet you there are a lot of others that don't choose that particular field because of those low success rates.
But you could see the pain in his eyes, like maintaining your humanity while doing all of it. You could see the story, you could see the family that loves that person. Just you feel the immensity of that, and you feel the heartbreak involved with mortality in that case, and with suffering also in that case, and in general in all these human trafficking. But even in helping families try to stay afloat, trying to break out or escape poverty, all of that, you get to see those stories of struggle. It's not easy. But the people that really feel the humanity of that, feel the pain of that, are probably the right people to be politicians. But it's probably also why you can't stay in there too long.
It's the only time in my life where you actually feel like there's always a conflict, right, between work and life, and making sure, you know, I as a woman, I'd often get asked about, you know, how do you balance work and family? And I never liked that question, because balance, it's like elusive, right? You're one fever away from like no balance, you know, right. Like your child's sick one day, what do you do? There goes balance. Or, you know, you have a huge project with a deadline, there goes balance. Like, I think a better way to frame it is, am I living in accordance with my priorities? Maybe not every day, but every week, you know, every month, and reflecting on, have you architected a life that aligns with your priorities, so that more often than not, you're where you need to be in that moment. And service at that level was the one time where you feel incredibly conflicted about having any priorities other than serving. It's finite, you know, in every business I've built, you're building for duration, you know, and then you go into the White House and it is sand through an hourglass, whether it's 4 years or 8 years, it's a finite period of time you have. And most people don't last 4 years. I think the average in the White House is 18 months. It's exhausting. But it's the only time when you're at home with your own children that you think about all the people you've met, and you feel guilty about any time that's spent not advancing those interests to the best of your capacity. And that's a hard thing. That's a really hard feeling as a parent. And it's really challenging then to be present, to always need to answer your phone, to always need to be available. It's very difficult. It's taxing, but it's also the greatest privilege in the world.
So through that, the turmoil of that, the hardship of that, what was the role of family through all of that? Jared and the kids, what was that like?
That was everything. You know, to have the support systems I had in place with with my husband, and we had left New York and wound up in Washington. In New York, I lived 10 blocks away from my mother-in-law, who, if I wasn't taking my kids to school, she was. So we lost some of that, which was very hard, but we had what mattered, which was each other. And my kids were young. When I got to Washington, Theo, my youngest, was 8 months old. And Arabella, my oldest, my daughter, was 5 years old. So they were still quite young. We have a son, Joseph, who was 3. And I think for me, like, the dose of levity coming home at night and having them there and just joyful, and it was super grounding and important for me. I still remember Theo, when he was around 3.5 years old, Jared used to make me coffee every morning, and it was like my great luxury that
Yeah.
I would sit there. He still makes it for me every morning. I told him I'm never, I secretly know how to actually work the coffee machine, but I've convinced him that I have no idea how to work the coffee machine. Now I'm going to be busted, but it's a skill I don't want to learn, because it's one of his like acts of love. He brings me coffee every morning in bed while I read the newspapers, and Theo would watch this, and so he got Jared to teach him how to make coffee, and Theo learned how to make like a full-blown cappuccino.
Nice.
And he had so much joy in every morning bringing me this cappuccino. And I remember like the sound of his little steps, like the slide. It was so cute coming down the hallway with my like perfectly foamed cappuccino. Now I try to get him to make me coffee, and he's like, come on, Mom. That was a moment in time, but we had a lot of like little moments like that were just amazing. So
Yeah, I got a chance to chat with him, and he has his silliness and sense of humor. It's it's really joyful.
yeah,
I could see how that could be an escape from the madness of Washington, of the adult
definitely.
life, the
And they were
quote-unquote
young
adult
enough.
life.
We really kept like our home life pretty sheltered from everything else, and we were able to do so because they were so young and because they weren't connected to the internet. They were too young for smartphones, all of these things. We were able to shelter and protect them and allow them to have as normal as upbringing as was possible in the context we were living. And they brought me and continue to bring me so much joy. But they were, without Jared and without the kids, it would have been much more lonely.
So 3 kids, you've now upgraded, 2 dogs and a hamster.
Well, our second dog, so we rescued him thinking, we thought it was probably like part German Shepherd, part Lab is what we were told.
Mhm.
He's now, I don't even know if he qualifies as a dog. He's the size of a horse, a small
basically a
horse,
yeah.
Simba. So I don't think he has much lab in him. I think Joseph has not wanted to do a DNA test because he really wanted a German Shepherd. So he's a German Shepherd.
Yeah, right.
He's gigantic. And we also have a hamster who's the newest addition, because my son, Theo, he tried to get a dog as well. Our first dog, Winter, became my daughter's dog and let her brothers play with him or sleep with him, and was old enough to bully them into submission. So then Joseph wanted a dog and got Simba. Theo now wants the dog and has Buster the hamster in the interim. So we'll see.
What advice would you give to other mothers just planning on having kids, and maybe advice to yourself how to continue figuring out this puzzle?
I think being a parent, you have to cultivate within yourself like heightened levels of empathy. You have to really look at each child and see them for who they are, what they enjoy, what they love, and meet them where they're at. And I think that can be enormously challenging when your kids are so different in temperament. As they get older, that difference in temperament may be within the same child, depending on the moment of the day. But it really, I think it's actually made me a much softer person, a much better listener, I think I see people more truly for who they are, as opposed to how I want them to be sometimes. And I think being a parent to 3 children who are all exceptional and all incredibly different has enabled that in me. I think for me though, they've also been like some of my greatest teachers, in that we were talking about the presence you felt when you were in the jungle, and the connectivity you felt, and sort of the simple joy. And I think for us, as we grow older, we kind of disconnect from that. Like, my kids have taught me how to play again. And that's beautiful. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, we had one of these crazy Miami torrential downpours. And Arabella comes down, it's around 8 o'clock at night. It's really raining. And she's got rain boots and pajama pants on, and she's going to take the dogs for a walk in the rain. Which, she had all day to walk, but she wasn't doing it because they needed to go for a walk. She was like, this would be fun. Yeah. And I'm standing at the doorstep watching her, and she goes out with Simba and Winter, this massive dog and this little tiny dog. And I'm watching her walk to the end of the driveway, and she's just dancing, and it's pouring. And I took off my shoes, and I went out, and I joined her, and we danced in the rain. And even as like a preteen who would normally, she like allowed me to experience the joy with her. And it was amazing. We can be so much more fun if we allow ourselves to be more playful. We can be so much more present. I look at, Theo loves games. So we play a whole lot of board games, any kind of game. So it started with board games. We do a lot of puzzles. That it became card games. I just taught him how to play poker.
Nice.
He loves backgammon, like any kind of game. And he's so fully in them. When he plays, he plays. My son Joseph, he loves nature. And he'll say to me sometimes when like I'm taking a picture of something he's observing, like a beautiful sunset, he's like, Mom, just experience it. Like, yes, you're right, Joseph, just experience it. So those kids have taught me so much about sort of reconnecting with what's real and what's true, and being present in the moment, and experiencing joy.
They always give you permission to sort of reignite the inner child, to be a kid again. Yeah. It's interesting what you said, that the puzzle of noticing each human being, like what makes them beautiful, the unique characteristics, like what they're good at, the way they want to be mentored. Like I often see that, especially with coaches and athletes, young athletes aspiring to be great. Each athlete needs to be trained in a different way. Like for example, with some you need a softer approach. Like with me, I always like a dictatorial approach. I like the coach to be this like menacing figure. That's when that brought out the best in me. I didn't want to be friends with the coach. Like I wanted almost, like, it's weird to say, but yelled at, like to be pushed. But that doesn't work for everybody. And that's a risk you have to take in the coach context of like, because you can't just yell at everybody.
Yeah.
You have to figure out like what does each person need. And when you have kids, I imagine the puzzle is even harder. And
when they all need different things, but yet coexist and are sometimes competitive with one another. So you'll be at a dinner table, the amount of times I get, well, that's not fair. Why did you let? And I'm like, life isn't fair. And by the way, like, I'm not here to be fair. I'm trying to give you each what you need. Especially when I've been working really hard, and in the White House, I'd say, okay, well, now we have a Sunday and we have these hours, and I'll have like a grand plan, and we're going to make it count. And it's going to involve, hot chocolate and sleds, whatever it is that like my great adventure, we're going to go play mini golf. And then I come down all psyched up, all ready to go. And the kids have zero interest. And there have been a lot of times where I've been like, we're doing this thing. And then I realized, wait a second, like sometimes you just like plop down on the floor and start playing Magna Tiles, and like, that's where they need you. And so those of us who have sort of like alpha personalities, who sometimes it's just witness what they need. Don't like play with them and allow them to lead the play. Don't force them down a road you may think is more interesting or productive or educational or edifying. Just be with them, observe them, and then show them that you are genuinely curious about the things that they are genuinely curious about. I think there's a lot of love when you do that.
Also, there's just fascinating puzzles. I was talking to a friend yesterday. She has 4 kids, and they fight a lot. And she generally wants to break up the fights, but she's like, I'm not sure if I'm just supposed to let them fight and they figure it out, but you always break them up, because I'm told that it's okay for them to fight. Kids do that. They kind of figure out their own situation. That's part of like the growing up process. But you want to always, especially if it's physical, they're like pushing each other. You want to kind of stop it. But at the same time, it's also part of the play, part of the dynamics. And that's a puzzle you also have to figure out. And plus, you're probably worried that they're going to get hurt. If they're.
Well, I think there's like, when it gets physical, that's like, okay, we have to intervene. I know you're into martial arts, but that's normally like the red line.
Yeah, sure.
Once it tips into that, there is always that. Like you have to allow them to problem solve for themselves. Like a little interpersonal conflict is good. It's really hard when you try to navigate something because everyone thinks you're taking their side. You have oftentimes incomplete information. It's I think for parents, what tends to happen too is we see our kids fighting with each other in a way that all kids do. And we start to project into the future and like catastrophize. If like my 2 sons are going through a moment where they're like oil and water, anything one wants to do, the other doesn't want to do. It's like a very interesting moment. So my instinct is, they're not going to like each other when they're 25. You sort of project into the future as opposed to recognizing this is a stage that I too went through and it's normal, and it's not building it in your mind into something that's unnecessarily consequential.
It's short-term formative conflict.
Yeah.
So ever since 2016, the number and the level of attacks you've been under has been steadily increasing, has been super intense. How do you walk through the fire of that? You've been very stoic about the whole thing. I don't think I've ever seen you respond to an attack. You just let it pass over you. You stay positive and you focus on solving problems. And you didn't engage. While being in DC, you didn't engage into the back and forth fire of politics. So what's your philosophy behind that?
I appreciate your saying that I was very stoic about it. I think, I feel things pretty deeply. So initially, some of that really took me off guard, like some of the derivative love and hatred, some of the intensity of the attacks. And there were times when it was so easy to counter it. I'd even write something out
8 overtimes
and say, well, I'm gonna press send, and never did. I felt that sort of getting into the mud, fighting back, it didn't run true to who I am as a human being. Like it felt at odds with who I am and how I want to spend my time. So I think as a result, I was oftentimes on the receiving end of a lot of cheap shots. And I'm okay with that because it's sort of the way I know how to be in the world. I was focused on things I thought mattered more. And, I think part of me also internalized, there's a concept in Judaism called Lashon Hara, which is translated into, I think quite literally, evil speech. And the idea that speaking poorly of another is almost the moral equivalent to murder, because you can't really repair it. You can apologize, but you can't repair it. Another component of that is that it does as much damage to the person saying the words than it does to the person receiving them. And I think about that a lot. I talk about this concept with my kids a lot. And I'm not willing to pay the price of that fleeting and momentary satisfaction of sort of swinging back. because I think it would be too expensive for my soul, and that's how I kind of made peace with it, because I think that feels more true for me. But it is a little bit contrarian in politics. It's definitely a contrarian viewpoint, to not get into the fray. Actually, someday I love Dolly Parton says that she doesn't condemn or criticize; she loves and accepts, and I like that. It feels right for me.
I also like that you said that words have power. It's not. Sometimes people say, "Well, words, when you speak negatively of others, that's just words." But I think there's a cost to that. There's a cost, like you said, to your soul, and there's a cost in terms of the damage you can do to the other person, whether it's to their reputation publicly or to them privately. It's just as a human being, psychologically, and in the place that it puts them, because they start thinking negatively in general, and then maybe they respond, and there's this vicious downward spiral that happens, that almost like we don't intend to, but it destroys everybody in the process. You quoted Alan Watts, I love him, in saying, quote, "You're under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." So how have the years in DC and the years after changed you?
I love Alan Watts too. I listen to his lectures sometimes, falling asleep. He's got the most soothing voice. But I love what he said about, you have no obligation to be who you were 5 minutes ago, because we should always feel that we have the ability to evolve and grow and better ourselves. Like, I think further than that, if we don't look back on who we were a few years ago with some level of embarrassment, we're not growing enough, right? So there's nothing. When I look back, I'm like, oh, I feel like that that feeling is, because you're growing into hopefully, sort of a better version of yourself. And I hope and feel that that's been true for me as well. I think the person I am today, we spoke in the beginning of our discussion about some of my earliest ambitions in real estate and in fashion, and those were amazing adventures and incredible experiences in government. And I feel today that all of those ambitions are more fully integrated into me as a human being. I'm much more comfortable with the various pieces of my personality, and that any professional drive is more integrated into more simple pleasures. Like, everything for me has gotten like much simpler and easier in terms of what I want to do and what I want to be. And I think that's where, my kids have been my teachers, just being fully present, and enjoying like the little moments. And it doesn't mean I'm any less like driven than I was before. It's just more a part of me than being sort of the all-consuming energy one has in their 20s.
Yeah, just like you said with your mom, be able to let go,
Yeah.
enjoy the water, the sun, the beach,
I like how you're
and
trying
enjoy the moment, the simplicity of the moment.
I think a lot about the fact that, for a lot of young people, they really know what they want to do, but they don't actually know who they are. And then I think as you get older, hopefully you know who you are, and you're much more comfortable with ambiguity around what you want to do and accomplish. You're more flexible in your thinking around those things.
And give yourself permission to be who you are.
Yeah.
You made the decision not to engage in the politics of the 2024 campaign. If it's okay, let me read what you wrote on the topic. Quote, "I love my father very much. This time around, I'm choosing to prioritize my young children and the private life we're creating as a family. I do not plan to be involved in politics. While I will always love and support my father, going forward, I will do so outside the political arena. I'm grateful to have had the honor of serving the American people, and I will always be proud of many of our administration's accomplishments." So can you explain your thinking, your philosophy behind that decision?
I think first and foremost, it was a decision rooted in me being a parent, really thinking about what they need from me now. Politics is a rough business, and I think it's one that you also can't dabble in. I think you have to either be all in or all out. And I know today the cost they would pay for me being all in. Emotionally, in terms of my absence at such a formative point in their life. And I'm not willing to make them bear that cost. I served for 4 years and feel so privileged to have done it. But as their mom, I think it's really important that I do what's right for them. And I think there are a lot of ways you can serve. I think there's, obviously we talked about the enormity, the scale of what can be accomplished in government service. But, I think there's something equally valuable about helping within your own community. And I volunteer with the kids a lot, and we feel really good about that service. It's different, but it's no less meaningful. So I think there are other ways to serve. I also think for, politics is a pretty dark world. Like there's a lot of darkness, a lot of negativity, and it's just really at odds with what feels good for me as a human being. And it's a really rough business. So for me and my family, it feels right to not participate.
So it wears on your soul. And there is a bit, at least from an outsider's perspective, a bit of darkness in that part of our world. I wish it didn't have to be this way.
Me too.
I think part of that darkness is just watching all the legal turmoil that's going on. What's it like for you to see that, your father involved in that, going through that?
On a human level, it's my father, and I love him very much. So it's painful to experience, but ultimately, I wish it didn't have to be this way.
I like it that underneath all of this, I love my father is the thing that you lead with. That's so true. It is family. And I hope amidst all this turmoil, love is the thing that wins.
But
it usually does.
In the end, yes. But in the short term, there is, like we were talking about, there's a bit of bickering. But at least no more duels.
Interested in the
No more duels.
You mentioned Dolly Parton.
That's a segue.
That's just, listen, I'm not very good at this thing. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, we both love Dolly Parton. So you're big into live music. So maybe you can mention why you love Dolly Parton. I definitely would love to I would love to interview her. She's such an icon.
What I love about her, and I've really come to love her in recent years, is she's so authentically herself, and she's obviously so talented and so accomplished and this extraordinary woman. But I just feel like she has no conflict within herself as to who she is. She reminds me a lot of my mom in that way, and it's super refreshing and really beautiful to observe somebody who's so in the public eye, being so fully secure in who they are, what their talent is, and what drives them. So I think she's amazing, and she leads with a lot of love and positivity. So I think she's very cool. I hope you have a long conversation.
Yeah, she's okay. So there's many things to say about her. First, incredibly great musician, songwriter, performer.
Yeah. Also
can create an image and have fun with it. Have fun being herself, over the top.
It feels that way, right? Yeah. She enjoys, after all these years, it feels like she enjoys what she does. And you also have the sense that if she didn't, she wouldn't do it.
That's right. And just an iconic country musician, country music singer.
Yeah.
There's a lot. We've talked about a lot of musicians. Who do you enjoy? You mentioned Adele, seeing her perform, hanging out with her.
Yeah, I mean, she's extraordinary. Her voice is unreal. So she is, I find her to be so talented, and she's so unique in that 3-year-olds love her music. She was actually the first concert Arabella ever went to at Madison Square Garden when she was around 4, and 90-year-olds love her music. And that's pretty rare to have that kind of bandwidth of resonance. So I think she's so talented. We actually just saw her. I took all 3 kids in Las Vegas around a month ago. Alice Johnson, whose case I had worked with in the White House. My father commuted her sentence. Her case was brought to me by a friend, Kim Kardashian, and she came to the show. We all went together with some mutual friends, and that was like a very profound. It was amazing to see Adele, but it was a very profound experience for me to have with my kids, because she rode with us in the car on the way to the show, and she talked to my kids about her experience and her story, and how her case found its way to me. And I think for young children, it's very abstract, policy. And so for her to be able to share with them this was a very beautiful moment, and led to a lot of really incredible conversations with each of my kids about our time in service, because, they gave up a lot for me to do it. Actually, Alice told them the most beautiful story about the plays she used to put on in prison, how these shows were like the hottest ticket in town. Like, you could not get into them. They always extended their run. And but for the people who were in them, a lot of those men and women had never experienced applause. Nobody had ever shown up at their games or at their plays and clapped for them. And the emotional experience of just being able to give someone that, being able to stand and applaud for someone, and how meaningful that was. And she was showing us pictures from these different productions, and it was a beautiful moment. Alice actually, after her sentence was commuted and she came out of prison, together we worked on 23 different pardons or commutations. So the impact of her experience, and how she was able to take her opportunity and create that same opportunity for others who were deserving and who she believed in was very beautiful. So anyway, that was an extraordinary concert experience for my kids to be able to have that moment.
What a story. So just that's the sort of the
and then here we are dancing at Adele.
Exactly. It's like that turning
6
point.
years later, it was almost to the day. 6 years later.
So that policy, that meeting of the minds, resulted in a major turning point in her life, and Alice's life, and now you're dancing.
And now we're at Adele.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned also I've seen commutations where it's an opportunity to step in and consider the ways that the justice system does not always work well. Like in cases when it's nonviolent crime and drug offenses, there's a case of a person you mentioned that received a life sentence for selling weed.
Yeah.
And it's just the number. It's like hundreds of thousands of people are in the federal prison and jail in the system for selling drugs. That's the only thing, with no violence on their record whatsoever. And obviously there's a lot of complexity. There's the details matter, but oftentimes the justice system does not do right in the way we think right is. And it's nice to be able to step in and help people, like in direct.
They're overlooked and they have no advocate. Jared and I helped in a small way on his effort, but he really spearheaded the effort on criminal justice reform through the First Step Act, which was an enormously consequential piece of legislation that gave so many people another opportunity. And that was amazing. So working with him closely on that was a beautiful thing for us to also experience together. But in the final days of the administration, you're not getting legislation passed. And anything you do administratively is going to be probably overturned by an incoming administration. So, how do you use that time for maximum results? And I really dug in on pardons and commutations that I thought were overdue and were worthy. And my last night in Washington, D.C., the gentleman you mentioned, Corvin, I was on the phone with his mother at 12:30 in the morning, telling her that her son would be getting out the next day. And it felt really, it's one person, but you see with Alice, like the ripple effect of, the commutation granted to her and her ability and the impact she'll have within her family, with her grandkids. And now she's an advocate for so many others who are voiceless. It felt like the perfect way to end 4 years, to be able to call those parents and call those kids in some cases and give them the news that a loved one was coming home.
And I just love the cool image of you, Kim Kardashian, and Alice just dancing on Adele show with the kids. I love it.
Well, Kim wasn't at the Adele show,
Okay.
but
Oh, she's got it.
she had connected us. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
It was really beautiful.
the way Adele can hold just the badassness she has on stage.
Oh, yeah.
She does heartbreak songs better than anyone. Or no, it's not even heartbreak. What's that genre of song? Rolling in the Deep, a little anger, a little love, a little something, a little attitude, and just one of the greatest voices ever. All that together, just her by herself.
Yeah. You can strip it down, and the power of her voice.
Yeah.
I think about that. One of the things we were talking about live music, one of the amazing things now is there's so much incredible concert material that's been uploaded to YouTube.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just sit there and watch these old shows. We both love Stevie Ray Vaughan, watching him perform. You can even find old videos of Django Reinhardt.
I
got you. Texas Blood.
We had this moment, which is hilarious, that you said one of the songs you really like of Stevie's is Texas Blood.
Well, my bucket list is to learn how to play it.
This is a bucket list. You made me feel so good, because for me, Texas Flood was the first solo on guitar I've ever learned, because for me it was the impossible solo.
Yeah.
And then that was so I worked really hard to learn it. It's one of the most iconic sort of blues songs, Texas blues songs. And now you made me fall in love with the song again, want to play it out live. At the very least, put it up on YouTube. Because it's so fun to improvise, and when you lose yourself in the song, it truly is a blues song. You can have fun with it.
I hope you do that.
Throw on a Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Regardless, I want you to play it for me.
100%.
But he's amazing, and there's so many great performers that are playing live now. I just saw Chris Stapleton show. He's an amazing country artist.
He's too good.
He's so
that
good.
guy is so good.
Lucas Nelson's one of my favorite to see live, and there's so many incredible songwriters and musicians that are out there touring today. But I think you can go online and watch some of these old performances. Django Reinhardt was the first, because I torture myself, was the first song I learned to play on the guitar, and it took me 9 months to a year. It was, I should have chosen a different song, but Où es-tu, mon amour, one of his songs was. And it was finger style, and I was just going through and grinding it out, and that's kind of how I started to learn to play, by playing that song. But to see these old videos of him playing, without all his fingers and the skill and the dexterity. One of my favorite live performances is actually, who really influenced Adele, is Aretha Franklin. And she did a version of Amazing Grace. Have you ever seen this video?
No.
I cried. Look up. It was in LA. It was the Temple Missionary Baptist Church. Talk about stripped down. She's literally just listen to this.
Well, you could do one note and you could just kill it. The soulfulness.
The spirit you feel in her when you watch this.
That's true. Adele carries some of that spirit also, right?
Yeah. And you can take away all the instruments with Adele and just have that voice, and it's so commanding, and it's so amazing. Anyway, you watch this and you see the arc of the experience of the people in the choir and them starting to join in. And it's amazing.
I love watching Queen, Freddie Mercury, Queen performances.
Yeah.
In terms of vocalists and just great stage presence.
That Live Aid performance is considered one of the best of all.
I've watched that so many times. He's so cool.
Here, wait, pull up that for a second. Go to that part where he's saying Radio Gaga and they're all mimicking his arm move. It's so cool.
Look at that.
So good.
That guy.
So good.
So that's an example
So-
of a person that was born to be on stage.
So good. Well, we were talking surfing, we were talking jujitsu. I think live music is one of those kind of rare moments where you can really be present. Where something about the anticipation of choosing what show you're going to go to and then waiting for the date to come. And normally it happens in the context of community. You go with friends and then allowing yourself to sort of fall into it is incredible.
So you've been training jiu-jitsu.
Trying.
I mean, I've seen you do jiu-jitsu. You're extremely, you're very like athletic. You know how to use your body to commit violence. Maybe there's better ways of phrasing that, but anyway,
It's been a skill that's been honed over time.
yeah. I mean, what do you like about jiu-jitsu?
Well, first of all, I love the way I came to it. It was my daughter. I think I told you this story. She's at 11. She told me that she wanted to learn self-defense and she wanted to learn how to protect herself, which I just, as a mom, I was so proud about because at 11, I was not thinking about defending myself. You know, I loved that she had sort of that desire and awareness. So I called some friends, actually a mutual friend of ours, and asked around for people who I could work with in Miami, and they recommended the Valente Brothers studio. And you've met all three of them now. They're these remarkable human beings, and they've been so wonderful for our family. I mean, first starting with Arabella, I used to take her, and then she'd kind of encourage me, and she'd sort of pull me into it, and I started doing it with her. And then Joseph and Theo saw us doing it. They wanted to start doing it, so now they joined, and then Jared joined. So now we're all doing jiu-jitsu, and for me, there's something really empowering knowing that I have some basic skills to defend myself. I think it's something as humans we've kind of gotten away from. You look at any other animal, and even the giraffe, they'll use their neck. The lion, the tiger, every species, and then there's us. Who most of us don't, and I didn't know how to protect myself. And I think that it gives you a sense of confidence and also gives you kind of a sense of calm, knowing how to de-escalate rather than escalate a situation. I also think as part of the training, you develop more natural awareness when you're out and about. And I feel like especially, you get on an elevator and like the first thing people do is pick up traffic. I think as you start to get this training, you become aware of what's happening around you, which is really healthy and good as well. But it's been beautiful. The Valente brothers, they have this 753 code that was developed with some of the sort of samurai principles in mind. And all of my kids have memorized. They'll talk to me about it. Theo, he's 8 years old. He'll is able to recite all 15. So benevolence and fitness and nutrition and flow and awareness and balance, and it's an unbelievable thing. And they'll actually integrate it into conversations where they'll talk about something that happened. Yeah, rectitude, courage.
Benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, loyalty. So this is not about jiu-jitsu techniques or fighting techniques. This is about a way of life, about the way you interact with the world, with other people. Exercise, nutrition, rest, hygiene, positivity. That's more on the physical side of things. Awareness, balance, flow.
It's the mind, the body, the soul, effectively, is how they break it out. And the kids can only advance and get their stripes if they really internalize this. They give examples of each of them. And my own kids will come home from school and they'll tell me examples of how things happen that weren't aligned with the 753 code. So it's a framework, much like religion is in our house and can be for others. It's a framework to discuss things that happen in their life, large and small, and it's been beautiful. So I do think that like body mind connection is super strong in jiu-jitsu.
So there's many things I love about the Valente brothers, but one of them is the how rooted it is in philosophy and history of martial arts in general. A lot of places you'll practice the sport of it, maybe the art of it, but to recognize the history
Yeah.
and what it means to be a martial artist broadly, on and off the mat. That's really great. And the other thing is great is they also don't forget the self-defense route, the actual fighting routes. So it's not just a sport, it's a way to defend yourself on the street in all situations. And that gives you a confidence. And just like you said, an awareness about your own body and awareness about others.
Yeah.
It is, sadly, we forget, but it's a world full of violence, or the capacity for violence. So it's good to have an awareness of that and a confidence how to essentially avoid it.
100%. I've seen it with all of my kids. And myself, how much they've benefited from it. But that self-defense component and the philosophical elements of, Pedro will often tell them about like Wu Wei and sort of soft resistance and some of these sort of more Eastern philosophies that they get exposed to through their practice there that are sort of non-resistance that are beautiful and hard concepts to internalize as an adult, but especially when you're 12, 10, and 8 respectively. So it's been an amazing experience for us all.
I love people like Pedro because he's like finding books that are like in Japanese and translating them to try to figure out like the details of a particular history. Like he's like an ultra scholar of martial arts, and I love that. I love when people give everything, every part of themselves to the thing they're practicing. Yeah. People have been fighting each other. You can't fake anything. You can't lie about anything.
Yeah,
it's truly honest. You're there, and you either win or lose. And it's simple, and that's like it's also humbling. That the reality of that is humbling.
And oftentimes in life, things are not that simple.
Yeah,
it's not that black and white.
So it's nice to have that sometimes. That's the biggest thing I gained from jiu-jitsu is getting my ass kicked, which is the humbling. And it's nice to just get humbled in a very clear way. Sports in general are great for that. I think surfing probably, because I can imagine just, face planting, not being able to stay on the board. It's humbling. And the power of the wave is humbling. So just like your mom, you're an adventurer. Are there... Your bucket list is probably like 120 pages. Is there things like just pop to mind that you're like thinking about, especially in the near future? Just anything?
Well, I hope it always is long. I hope I've never like exhausted exploring all the things I'm curious about. I always tell my kids whenever they say, Mom, I'm bored. Only boring people get bored. Like there's too much to learn. There's too much to learn. So I've got a long one. I think obviously there are some like immediate tactical, interesting things that I'm doing. I'm incubating a bunch of businesses. I'm investing in a bunch of companies that hopefully I'll always can continue to do that. Some of the fun things I'm doing in real estate now. So those are all on the list of things I'm passionate and excited about, continuing to explore and learn. But in terms of the ones that are more pure sort of adventure or hobby, I think I'd like to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Actually, I know I would. And I the only thing keeping me from doing it in the short term is I feel like it'd be such a great experience to do with my kids. And I'd love to have that experience with them. I also told Arabella, we were talking about this archery competition that happens in Mongolia, and she loves back riding. So I'm like, I feel like that would be an amazing thing to experience together. I want to get barreled by a wave and learn how to play Texas Flood. I want to see the Northern Lights. Like I want to go and experience that. I feel like that would be really beautiful. I want to get my black belt. Like you have. I asked you, how long did it take? But so I want to get my black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's going to be a longer term goal, but within the next decade. A lot of things. I'd love to go to space. Not just space. I think I'd love to go to the moon.
Like step on the moon.
Yeah. Or float, in close proximity, like that famous photo.
Yeah. It's just you and
the space dude. I feel like Mars is at this point in my life. So, well, the moon's like 4 days feels more manageable.
No. But the
But-
sunset on Mars is blue. It's the opposite color. I hear it's beautiful. It might be worth it. I don't know.
You negotiate with Theo.
Yeah. Hey,
Let me
bring the
know
whole
how it
family,
goes. Let
right?
me know how it goes.
I think actually just even going to space, we can look back on Earth.
Yeah.
I think that just to see this little
Pale blue dot.
pale blue dot, just all the stuff that ever happened in human civilization is on that, and to be able to look at it,
Yeah.
and just be in awe. And I don't think that's the thing that will go away.
I think being interplanetary, my hope is that that heightens for us how rare it is what we have, like how precious the Earth is. I hope that it has that effect, because I think there's a big component to interplanetary travel that kind of taps into this kind of manifest destiny inclination, like the human desire to conquer territory and expand the footprint of civilization that sometimes feels much more rooted in like dominance and conquest than curiosity, wonder, and obviously I think there's maybe an existential imperative for it at some point, or a strategic and security one. But I hope that what feels inevitable at this moment, I mean, Elon Musk and what he's doing with SpaceX and Jeff Bezos and others, it feels like it's not an if, it's a when at this point. I hope it also underscores like the need to protect what we have here.
Yeah. And I hope it's the curiosity that drives that exploration, and I hope the exploration will give us a deeper appreciation of the thing we have back home, and that Earth will always be home, and it's a home that we protect and celebrate. What gives you hope about the future thing we have going on, human civilization, the whole thing?
I think I feel a lot of hope when I'm in nature. I feel a lot of hope when I am experiencing people who are good and honest and pure and true and passionate. And that's not an uncommon experience. So those experiences give me hope.
Yeah, other humans. We're pretty cool.
I love humanity. We're awesome. Not always, but we're a pretty good species.
Yeah, for the most part, on the whole, we do all right.
Yeah.
We do all right. We create some beautiful stuff, and I hope we keep creating, and I hope you keep creating. You've already done a lot of amazing things, build a lot of amazing things, and I hope you keep building and creating and doing a lot of beautiful things in this world. Ivanka, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Ivanka Trump. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, let me leave you with some words from Marcus Aurelius. Dwell on the beauty of life. Watch the stars and see yourself running with them. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you next time.
Hardship will show you who your real friends are, that's for sure. You can read the quote once more.
Don't eat with people you wouldn't starve with. The following is a conversation with Andrew Huberman, his 5th time on the podcast. He is the host of the Huberman Lab podcast and is an amazing scientist, teacher, human being, and someone I'm grateful to be able to call a close friend. Also, he has a book coming out next year that you should pre-order now called Protocols, an operating manual for the human body. This is the Lex Friedman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Andrew Huberman. You think there's ever going to be a day when you walk away from podcasting?
Definitely. I mean, I came up within and then on the periphery of skateboard culture. And for the record, I was not a great skateboarder. I always have to say that because skateboarders are relentless. if you call something you didn't do or whatever. I mean, I could do a few things, and I loved the community, and I still have a lot of friends in that community. Jim Thiebaud at Deluxe, you can look him up. He's kind of the man behind the whole scene. You know, Tony Hawk, Danny Way, all these guys, I got to see them come up and get big and stay big in many cases, start huge companies like Danny and Colin McKay are DC. Some people have a long life in something, some don't. But one thing I observed and learned a lot from in skateboarding, at the level of observing the skateboarders and then the ones that started companies. And then what I also observed in science, and still observe, is you do it for a while. You do it at the highest possible level for you. And then at some point, you pivot and you start supporting the young talent coming in. In fact, the greatest scientists, people like Richard Axel, Catherine Dulac, there are many other labs in neuroscience, Carl Dijsselhoff, they're not just known for doing great science, they're known for mentoring some of the best scientists that then go on to start their own labs. And I think in podcasting, I am very fortunate I got in a fairly early wave, not the earliest wave, but thanks to your suggestion of doing podcasts, fairly early wave. And I'll continue to go as long as it feels right. And I feel like I'm doing good in the world and providing good. But I'm already starting to scout talent. My company that I started with Rob Moore, Psycom Media, a couple other guys in there too, Mike Blayback, our photographer, Ian Mackey, Chris Ray, Martin Phobes. We are a company that produces podcasts. Right now that's Huberman Lab Podcast, but we're launching a new podcast, Perform, with Dr. Andy Galpin. And we want to do more of that kind of thing, finding a really great talent, highly qualified people, credentialed people. And I've got a new kind of obsession with scouring the internet, looking for the young talent in science, in health, and related fields. And so will there be a final episode of the HLP? Yeah, I mean, bullet buster cancer aside, someday they'll be the very last. And thank you for your interest in science. And I'll clip out.
Yeah, I love the idea of walking away and not be dramatic about it.
Right.
When it feels right, you can leave and you can come back whenever the fuck you want. Jon Stewart did this well with The Daily Show. I think that was during the 2016 election when everybody wanted him to stay on and he just walked away. Dave Chappelle, for different reasons, walked away,
Disappeared, came back.
gave away so much money, didn't care, and then came back and was doing like stand-up in the park in the middle of nowhere. Genius. You have Habib, who undid, walks away at the very top of a sport.
Is he coming back?
No.
At least we don't know.
Right, you don't know. I don't know if you know.
Bears everywhere over. Yeah, I think it's always a call. The last few years have been tremendous growth. We launched in January 2021, and even this last year, 2024, has been huge growth. In all sorts of ways, it's been wild. And we have some short form content planned, 30-minute shorter episodes that really distill down the critical elements. We're also thinking about moving to other venues besides podcasting. So there's always the thought and the discussion. But when it comes to like when to hang up your cleats, it's like there just comes a natural time where you can do more to mentor the next generation coming in than focusing on self. And so there will come a time for that. And I think it's critical. I mean, again, I saw this in skateboarding, like Danny and Colin and Danny's brother, Damon, started DC with Ken Block, the driver who unfortunately passed away a little while ago, rally car driver. And they eventually sold it, I think, to Quicksilver or something like that. But they're all phenomenal talents in their respective areas. But they brought in the next line of amazing riders, the Plan B thing, Paul Rodriguez. For skateboarders, they know who this is. Now, in science, there are scientists like Feynman, for instance. I don't know if anyone can name one of his mentor offspring. So there are scientists who are phenomenal, like beyond world class, right? Multi-generational world class, who don't make good mentors. I'm not saying he wasn't a good mentor, but that's not what he's known for. And then there are scientists who are known for being excellent scientists and great mentors. And I think there's no higher celebration to be had at the end of one's career if you can look back and like, hey, I put some really important knowledge into the world. People made use of that knowledge. And guess what? You spawned all these other scientific offspring or sport offspring or podcast offspring. I mean, in some ways we look to Rogan and to some of the other earlier podcasts as like they paved the way. Rhonda Patrick, first science podcast out there. So, it eventually the baton passes, but fortunately right now everybody's active and it feels really good.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the healthy way to do it, but there's also a different kind of way where you have somebody like Grigori Perelman, the mathematician who refused to accept the Fields Medal. He's one of the greatest living mathematicians, and he just walked away from mathematics and rejected the Fields Medal.
What did he do after he left mathematics?
Life, private, 100%.
I respect that.
He's become essentially a recluse. These photos of him looking very broke, like he could use the money. He turned away the money. He turned away everything. There's you just have to listen to the inner voice. You have to listen to yourself and make the decisions that don't make any sense for the rest of the world and make sense to you.
I mean, Bob Dylan didn't show up to pick up his Nobel Peace Prize. That's punk. Yeah. He probably grew in notoriety for that. Maybe he just doesn't like going to Sweden, but it seemed like it would be a fun trip. I think they do it in a nice time of year. But hey, that's his right. He earned that right.
I think the best artists aren't doing it for the prize. They aren't doing it for the fame or the money. They're doing it because they love the art.
It's the Rick Rubin thing. You got to verb it through, download your inner thing. I don't think we've talked about this obsession that I have about how Rick has this way of being very, very still in his body, but keeping his mind very active as a practice. Went and spent some time with him in Italy last June, and we would tread water in his pool in the morning and listen to History of Rock and Roll and 100 Songs. Amazing podcast, by the way.
It is.
Yeah. And then he would spend a fair amount of time during the day, in this kind of meditative state where his mind is very active, body very still. And then Carl Dijsselroth, when he came on my podcast, talked about how he forces himself to sit still and think in complete sentences late at night after his kids go to sleep. And there's a state of mind, rapid eye movement sleep, where your body is completely paralyzed and the mind is extremely active. And people credit movement sleep with some of the more elaborate emotion-filled dreams and the source of many ideas. And there are other examples. Einstein, people described him as taking walks around the Princeton campus and pausing and would ask him what was going on. And the idea that his mind was continuing to churn forward at a high rate. So, this is far from controlled studies, but we're talking about some incredible minds and creatives who have a practice of stilling the body while keeping the mind deliberately very active, very similar to rapid eye movement sleep. And then there are a lot of people who also report, great ideas coming to them in the shower, while running. So it can be the opposite as well, where the body is very active and the mind is perhaps more on kind of like a default mode network, not really focusing on any one specific thing.
Interesting. There's a bunch of physicists and mathematicians I've talked to. They talk about sleep deprivation and going crazy hours through the night, obsessively pursuing a thing. And then the solution to the problem comes when they finally get rest.
Right. And we know, we just did this 6th episode special series on sleep with Matt Walker. We know that when you deprive yourself of sleep and then you get sleep, you get a rebound in rapid eye movement sleep. You get a higher percentage of rapid eye movement sleep. And Matt talks about this in the podcast, and we did an episode on sleep and creativity, sleep and memory, and rapid eye movement sleep comes up multiple times in that series. There's also some very interesting stuff about cannabis withdrawal and rapid eye movement sleep. People who are coming off cannabis often will suffer from insomnia, but when they finally do start sleeping, they dream like crazy. Cannabis is a very controversial topic right now.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. What happened? There's a bunch of drama around episode you did on cannabis.
Yeah, we did an episode about cannabis, talked about the health benefits and the potential risks, right? It's neither here nor there. Depends on the person, depends on the age, depends on genetic background, a number of other things. We published that episode well over a year ago, and it had no issues online, so to speak. And then a clip of it was put to X, where, the real action occurs, as you know, your favorite spot.
Yeah.
The 4-ounce gloves as opposed to the 16-ounce gloves. That is X versus Instagram or YouTube. There was kind of an immediate dogpile from a few people in the cannabis research field.
The PhDs and MDs. Yeah.
There were people on our side. There were people on our side. I mean, the statement that got things riled up the most was this notion that for certain individuals, there's a high potential for inducing psychosis with high THC containing cannabis. For certain individuals, not all. That sparked some issues. There was really a split. You see this in different fields. There was one person in particular who came out swinging with language that, in my opinion, is not like of the sort that you would use at a university venue among colleagues, but that's fine. We're all grown ups.
Well, for me, from my perspective, it was strangely rude, and it had an air of like elitism that, to me, was at the source of the problem during COVID that led to the distrust of science and the popularization of disrespecting science, because so many scientists spoke with an arrogance and a douchebaggery that I wish we would have a little bit less of.
Yeah, it's tough because most academics don't understand that people outside the university system are they're not familiar with like the inner workings of science and the culture, and so you have to be very careful how you present when you're a university professor. And when he came out swinging at some 4-letter word type language, and he was obviously upset about it. So I simply said what I would say anywhere, which was, "Hey, look, come on the podcast, let's chat, and why don't you tell me where I'm wrong, and let's discuss." And fortunately, he agreed. And initially, he said, "Well, no, how can I be sure you're not going to misrepresent me?" And so I said, we got on a DM, then an email, then eventually phone call, and just said, "Hey, listen, like, you're welcome to record the whole conversation. We've never done a gotcha on my podcast, and let's just get to the heart of the matter. I think this little controversy is perfect kindling for a really great discussion." And he had some other conditions that we worked out, and I felt like, cool, like he's really interested. You get a very different person on the phone than you do on Twitter. I will say he's been very collegial, and that conversation is on the schedule. I said, "We'll fly you out, we'll put you up." He said, "No, he wants to fly himself. He really wants to make sure that there's like kind of a space between I think some of the perception of science and health podcasts in the academic community is that it's all designed to sell something. No, we run ads so it can be free to everyone else." But I think, look, in the end, he agreed, and I'm excited for the conversation. It was interesting because in the wake of that little exchange, there's been a bunch of press from traditional press about cannabis has now surpassed alcohol in many cultures as within the United States. As when I say cultures, I mean demographics. The United States as the drug of choice. There have been people highlighting the issues of potential psychosis and high THC containing. And so it's kind of interesting to see how traditional media is sort of on board certain elements that, I put forward. And I think there's some controversy as to whether or not the different strains, the indicas and sativas, are biologically different, et cetera. So we'll get down into the weeds, unintended, during that one. And I'm excited. It's the first time that we've responded to a direct criticism online about scientific content in a way that really promoted, like, oh, here, the idea of inviting a particular guest. And so it's great. Let's get a guest who is expert in cannabis. I believe, I could be wrong about this, that he's a behavioral neuroscientist, a slightly different training, but look, he seems highly credentialed. It'll be fun. And we welcome that kind of exchange. I'm not being diplomatic. I'm just saying, like, it's cool. Like, he's coming on, and he was friendly on the phone, right? Like, he literally came out online and was like, basically like, kind of like F you, like F this and F you. But you get someone on the phone and it's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, well, there was an immediate apology of like, hey, listen, I came out. Normally I'm like not like that, but online,
Oh, yeah?
you get a different.
Oh, yeah? Okay, listen.
Yeah. So it's a little bit like jiu-jitsu, right? People say all sorts of things, I guess, but if you're like, all right, well, let's go, then it's probably a different story. You know?
It's not like jiu-jitsu, because in jiu-jitsu people don't talk shit because they know what the consequences are. let me just say, on mic and off mic, you have been very respectful towards this person, and I look up to you and respect you and admire the fact that you have been. That said, to me, that guy was being a dick. And when you graciously, politely invited him on the podcast, he was still talking down to you the whole time. So I really admire and look forward to listening to you talk to him. But I hope others don't do that. Like, you are a positive, humble voice, exploring all the interesting aspects of science. Like, you want to learn. If you've got anything wrong, you want to learn about it. The way he was being a dick, I was just hurt a little bit, not because of him, but because, like, there's some people I really, really admire, brilliant scientists, not their best selves on Twitter, on X.
Definitely.
I don't understand what happens to their brain.
They regress. They regress, and they also are protected. You know, when you remove no scientific argument should ever come to physical blows, right? But when you remove the real world thing of being right in front of somebody, people will throw all sorts of stones at a distance, and over a wall, and they've got their wife or their husband or their boyfriend or their dog or their cat to go cuddle with them afterwards. But you get in a room and it's like, confrontational people in real life are pretty rare, but hopefully if they do it, they're like willing to back it up with knowledge in this case, right? We're not talking about physical altercation. Yeah, he kept coming and he kept putting on conditions. How do I know you want this? And I was like, well, you can record the conversation. How do I know you want that? Listen, we'll pay for you to come out. How do you know? And eventually he just kind of relented, and to his credit, he's agreed to come on. He still has to show up, but once he does, we'll treat him right like we would any other guest.
Yeah, you treat people really well, and I just hope that people are a little bit nicer on you.
Yeah, well, X is an interesting one because it thickens your skin, to go on there. I mean, you have to be ready to deal with.
Sure, but I can still criticize people for being douchebags, because like that's still not good, inspiring behavior. Like, especially for scientists, that should be sort of symbols of scientific thinking, which requires intellectual humility. Humility is a big part of that, and Twitter is a good place to illustrate that.
Years ago, I was a student in TA, then instructor, and then directed a Cold Spring Harbor course on visual neuroscience. These are summer courses that explore different topics, and at night we would host what we hoped were battles in front of the students, where you'd get two people on it. Would it be neural prosthetics or molecular tools that would first, restore vision to the blind kind of arguments? Kind of like, it's kind of a silly argument because it's going to be a combination of both, right? But you get these great arguments, but the arguments were always couched in data, and occasionally you'd get somebody would go like, or would curse or something, but it was the rare, very, very well placed, insult. It wasn't, coming out swinging. I think ultimately, Twitter's a record of people's behavior. The internet is a record of people's behavior. And here I'm not talking about news reports about people's behavior. I'm talking about how people show up online is really important. You've always carried yourself with a ton of composure and respect. And, you would hope that people would grow from that example. Well, I'll tell you that the podcasters that I'm scouting, it's their energy, but it's also how they treat other people, how they respond to comments. And, we're blessed to have pretty significant reach. When we put out a podcast, like someone else's podcast, it goes far and wide. So like a skateboard team, like a laboratory where you're selecting people to be in your lab, you want to pick people that you would enjoy working with in their colleagues. Etiquette is lacking nowadays, but you're in the suit and tie, bringing it back.
You said that your conversation with James Hollis, the Jungian psychoanalyst, had a big impact on you. What do you mean?
James Hollis is a 84-year-old Jungian psychoanalyst who's written 17 books, including Under Saturn's Shadow, which is on the healing and trauma of men, the Eden Project, which is about relationships and creating a life. I discovered James Hollis in an online lecture that was recorded, I think, in San Diego. It's on YouTube. The audio is terrible, called Creating a Life. And this was somewhere in the 2011 to 2015 span. I can't remember. I was on my way to Europe, and I called my girlfriend at the time. Like, I just found the most incredible lecture I've ever heard. And he talks about the shadow. He talks about your developmental upbringing and how you either align with or go 180 degrees off your parents' tendencies and values in certain areas. He talked about the specific questions to ask of oneself at different stages of life to live a full life. So it's always been a dream of mine to meet him and to record a podcast. And he wasn't able to travel, so our team went out to DC, sat down with him. We rarely do that nowadays. People come to our studio. And he came in, he had surgeries recently, and he came in with some assistance from a cane, and then sat down and just blew my mind. From start to finish, he didn't miss a syllable. And every sentence that he spoke was like a quotable sentence with real potency and actionable items. I think one of the things that was most striking to me was how he said, when we take ourselves out of stimulus and response and we just force ourselves to spend some time in the quiet of our thoughts while walking or while seated or while lying down. It doesn't have to be meditation, but it could be. That we access our unconscious mind in ways that reveals to us who we really are and what we really want. And that if we do that practice repeatedly, 10 minutes a day here, 15 minutes a day there, that we start to really touch into our unique gifts and the things that make us each us and the directions we need to take. But that so often we just stay in stimulus response. We just do, which is great. We have to be productive. But we miss those important messages. And interestingly, he also put forward this idea of, what is it? Like, get up, shut up, suit up. Yeah, something like that. Like, get out of bed, suit up, and shut up and get to work. He also has that in him, kind of a Goggins type mindset.
To be able to turn off all this self-reflection and self-analysis and just get shit done.
But then also to dedicate time and stop and just let stuff geyser to the surface from the unconscious mind. And he quotes Shakespeare, and he quotes Jung, and he quotes everybody through history with incredible accuracy and in exactly the way needed to drive home a point. But that conversation to me was one that I really felt like, okay, if I don't wake up tomorrow for whatever reason, that one's in the can, and I feel really great about it. To me, it's the most important guest recording we've ever done, in particular because he has wisdom. And while I hope he lives to be 204, chances are he's got another, 20, 30 years with us, hopefully more. But I really, really wanted to capture that information and get it out there. So I'm very, very proud of that one. And he's the kind of guy that anyone's doing, young, old, male, female, whatever, and you're going to get something of value.
What do you think about this idea of the shadow? That the good and the bad that we repress, that hides from plain sight when we analyze ourselves, that's there. You think there's like a ocean we don't have direct access to?
Yes. Yeah. Jung said it. We have all things inside of us, and we do. And some people are more in touch with those than others, and some people it's repressed. I mean, does that mean that we could all be, horrible people or marvelous people, benevolent people? Perhaps. I think, thankfully, more often than not, people lean away from the violent and harmful parts of their shadow. But I think spending time thinking about, one's shadows is super important. How else are we going to grow? Otherwise, we have these unconscious blind spots of denial or repression or whatever, the psychiatrists tell us. But yeah, it clearly exists within all of us. I mean, we have neural circuits for rage. We all do. We have neural circuits for altruism. And no one's born without these things. And some people they're atrophied and some people they're hypertrophied, but looking inward and recognizing what's there is key.
Or positive things like creativity. Maybe that's what Rick Rubin is accessing when he goes silent. Silent body, active mind. That's interesting. What is it for you? What place do you go to that generates ideas, that helps you generate ideas?
I have a lot of new practices around this. I mean, I'm always exploring for protocol. I have to, like in my nature. When I went and spent time with Rick, I tried to adopt his practice of staying very still and just letting stuff, come to the surface, or the Dice-Sarathian way of formulating complete sentences while being still in the body. What I have found works better is what my good friend Tim Armstrong does to write music. He writes music every day. He's a music producer. He's obviously a singer, guitar player for Rancid, and he's helped dozens and dozens and dozens of female pop artists and punk rock artists write great songs. And many of the famous songs that you've heard from other artists, Tim helped them write. Tim wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night, and what he does is he'll start drawing or painting. So what he's done, and Joni Mitchell talked about this too, you find some creative outlet that's like 15 degrees off center from your main creative outlet, and you do that thing. So for me, that's drawing. I like doing anatomical drawings, neuroscience-based drawing neurons, that kind of thing. And if I do that for a little while, my mind starts churning on the nervous system and biology, and then I come up with areas I'd like to explore for the podcast, ways I'd like to address certain topics. Right now, I'm very interested in autonomic control. A beautiful paper came out that shows that anyone can learn to control their pupil sizes and without changing luminance through a biofeedback mechanism. And that gives them control over their so-called autonomic nervous system. And I've been looking at what the circuitry is, and it's beautiful. So I'll draw the circuitry that we know underlies autonomic function. And as I'm doing that, I'm thinking, what about autonomic control and those people that supposedly can control their pupil size? Then you go in and there's a paper published in Nature Press, one of the nature journals, and there's a recent paper on this. I'm like, oh, cool. And then we talk about this. And then how could this be put into a kind of a post? Or how could this, so doing things that are about 15 degrees off center from your main thing is a great way to access, I believe, the circuits for, in Tim's case, painting goes to songwriting. I think for Joni Mitchell, that was also the case, right? I think it was drawing and painting to singing and songwriting. For Rick, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's listening to podcasts. I don't know. That's his business. Do you have anything that you like to focus on that allows you then an easier transition into your main creative work?
No, I'd really like to focus on emptiness and silence. So I pick the dragon I have to slay, so whatever the problem I have to work on, and then just sit there and stare at it.
I love how fucking linear you are.
And if you're tired, I'll just sit. I believe in the power of just waiting. And usually I'll stop being tired. Their energy rises from somewhere, or an idea pops from somewhere, but there needs to be a silence and an emptiness. It's an empty room, just me and the dragon, and we wait. That's it. Like if it's usually with programming, you're thinking about a particular design, like how do I design this thing to solve this problem?
Any cognitive enhancers? I've got quite the gallery in front of me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Should we walk through this?
Yeah.
This is not a sales thing. It's just I tend to do this bounce back and forth. Your refrigerator just happened to have a lot of different choices. So water,
This is all my refrigerator.
I know, right? There's no food in there. There's water. There's Element, which they now have canned.
Yeah.
And yes, they're a podcast sponsor for both of us, but that's not why I crack one of these open. I like them provide their gold.
And that's, by the way, my least favorite flavor, as I was saying. That's the reason it's still left in the fridge.
The cherry one is really good.
The black cherry. There's an orange one.
Yeah. I pushed the sled this morning and pulled the sled for my workout at the gym, and it was hot today here in Austin. So some salt is good. And then Matina Yerba Mate, zero sugar. Full confession, I helped develop this. I'm a partial owner, but I love Yerba Mate. Half Argentine, been drinking mate since I was a little kid. There's actually a photo somewhere on the internet when I'm like 3, sitting on my grandfather's lap, sipping mate out the gourd. And then this, my fun, interesting, this is just a little bit of coffee with a scoop of, Brian Johnson gave me cocoa, just like pure unsweetened cocoa.
Mm-hmm.
So I put that in chocolate. I like it. It
Just for the taste.
well, actually nukes my appetite. And since we're not going out to dinner tonight until later, I figure that's good. Yeah, Brian's an interesting one, right? He's really pushing this thing.
The optimization level.
Yeah. Although he just hurt his ankle. He posted a photo that he hurt his ankle. So now he's injecting BPC, body protection compound 157, which many people are taking, by the way. I did an episode on pep. I should just say, BPC 157, one of the known effects in animal models is angiogenesis, like development of new vasculature, which can be great in some contexts, but also if you have a tumor, you don't really want to vascularize that tumor anymore. So I worry about people taking BPC 157 continually, but and there's very little human data. I think there's like one lousy one. A lot of animal data. Some of the peptides are interesting, however. There's one that I've experimented with a little bit called pinealin, which I find, even if I've just taken it twice a week before sleep, then it seems to do something to the circadian timekeeping mechanism, because then on other days when I don't take it, I get unbelievably tired at that time that normally I would do the injection. These are things that I'll experiment with for a couple of weeks and then typically stop, maybe try something else. But I stay out of things that really stimulate any of like major hormone pathways. When it comes to peptides,
That's actually a really good question of how do you experiment? Like, how long do you try a thing to figure out if it works for you?
well, I'm very sensitive to these things. So I have been doing a lot of things for a long time. So if I add something in, it's always one thing at a time. And I notice right away if it does not make me feel good. Like there's a lot of excitement about some of the so-called growth hormone secretagogues, hypermorelin, testosterone, fermorelin. I've experimented a little bit with those in the past, and they new to my rapid eye movement sleep, but giving me a lot of deep sleep, which doesn't feel good to me, but other people like them. I also just generally try and avoid taking peptides that tap into these hormone pathways because you can run into all sorts of issues, but some people take them safely. But usually after about 4 or 5 days, I know if I like something or I don't, and I move on. But I am not super adventurous with these things. I know people that will take cocktails of peptides with multiple things. They'll try anything. That's not me. And I do blood work. But also I'm mainly reading papers and podcasting, and I'm teaching a course next spring. Stanford, I'm going to do a big undergraduate course. So I'm trying to develop that course and things like that. So I don't need to lift more weight or run further than I already do, which is not that much weight or far as it is.
Right, you're not going to the Olympics. You're not trying to truly maximize the best of your performance.
No, and I'm not trying to get down below whatever, 7% body fat or something. I don't have those kinds of goals. So hydration, electrolytes, caffeine in the form of mate, and then this coffee, and then here's one that I think I brought out for discussion. This is a piece of Nicorette. They're not a sponsor. Nicotine is an interesting compound. It will raise blood pressure, and it is probably not safe for everybody. But the nicotine is gaining in popularity like crazy. Mainly these pouches that people put in the lip. Not about smoking, vaping, dipping, or snuffing. My interest in nicotine started. This was in 2010. I was visiting Columbia Medical School, and I was in the office of the great neurobiologist Richard Axel, won the Nobel Prize, co-recipient with Linda Buck for the discovery of the molecular basis of olfaction. Brilliant guy. He's probably in his late 70s now. And he kept popping Nicorette in his mouth. And I was like, what's this about? And he said, oh, well, this was just anecdote, right? But he said, it protects against Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I said, it does? And he goes, yeah. I don't know if he was kidding or not. He's known for making jokes. And then he said that when he used to smoke, it really helped his focus and creativity. But then he quit smoking because he didn't want lung cancer. And he found that he couldn't focus as well. So he would choose Nicorette. So occasionally, like right now, I do a half a piece. But I'm not Russian. So I'm a little, you have to juice pop the whole thing in your mouth. Mm-hmm. So I'll do a couple milligrams every now and again. And it definitely sharpens the mind on an empty stomach in particular, but you fast all day. You're still doing 1 meal a day.
1 meal a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a nicotine pouch with Rogan at dinner. And I got high.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's like usually 6 or 8 milligrams. I know people that get a canister of Zyn, take 1 a day. Pretty soon they're taking a canister a day. You have to be very careful. I will only allow myself 2 pieces of Nicorette total per week. And you will notice that, in the day after you use it, sometimes your throat will feel a little bit like a little spasm, like you might want to cough once or twice. And so if you're a singer or you're a podcaster or something, you have to do long podcasts and just be mindful. But yeah, you're supposed to kind of like keep it in your cheek, and here we go.
But it did make me intensely focused in a way that was a little bit scary because
The nucleus basalis is in the basal forebrain nucleus has cholinergic neurons that radiate out axons, little wires that release acetylcholine into the neocortex and elsewhere. And when you focus on one particular topic matter or one particular area of your visual field or listening to something and focusing visually, we know that there's an elaboration of the amount of acetylcholine released there, and it binds to nicotinic acetylcholine receptor sites there. So it's a kind of an attentional modulation by acetylcholine. So you're getting it with nicotine, you're getting an exogenous or artificial heightening of that circuitry.
And the time I had Tucker Carlson on the podcast, he told me that apparently it helps him, as he said publicly, keep his love life vibrant.
Really? It causes vasoconstriction.
Like he literally said it makes his dick really hard. He said that publicly also.
Okay, well, as little as I want to think about Tucker Carlson's sex life, no disrespect, the major effect of nicotine on the vasculature, my understanding is that it causes vasoconstriction, not vasodilation. Drugs like Cialis, tadalafil, Viagra, etc., are vasodilators. They allow more blood flow. Nicotine does the opposite, less blood flow to the periphery, but provided dosages are kept low. And I don't recommend people use it frequently or at all. And I don't recommend young people use it, 25 and younger. Brain's very plastic at that time. And certainly smoking, dipping, vaping, snuffing aren't good because you're going to run into trouble for other reasons. But in any case, and even there, vaping is a controversial topic. It's probably safer than smoking, but has its own issues. And I said something like that, and boy, did I catch a lot of heat for that. You can't say anything as a health scientist or not to somebody else. It just depends on where the center is and how far outside that you are.
For me, the caffeine is the main thing. And actually, it's a really big part of my life. And one of the things you recommend that people wait a bit in the morning to consume caffeine.
If they experience a crash in the afternoon. This is one of the misconceptions I regret. Maybe even for people that crash in the afternoon, oftentimes if they delay their caffeine by 60 to 90 minutes in the morning, they will offset some of that. But if you eat a lunch that's too big or you didn't sleep well the night before, you're not going to avoid that afternoon crash. But I'll wake up sometimes and go straight to hydration, caffeine, especially if I'm going to work out. Here's a weird one. If I exercise before 8:30 a.m., especially if I start exercising when I'm a little bit tired, I get energy that lasts all day. If I wait until my peak of energy, which is mid-morning, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and I start exercising then, I'm basically exhausted all afternoon. And I don't understand why. I mean, it depends on the intensity of the workout, but I like to be done, showered, and heading into work by 9 a.m., but I don't always meet that.
So you're saying it doesn't affect your energy if you start with exercising?
I think you can get energy and wake yourself up with exercise if you start early, and then that fuels you all day long. I think that if you wait until you're feeling at your best to train, sometimes that's detrimental, because then in the afternoon when you're doing like the work we get paid for, like research, podcasting, etc., then oftentimes your brain isn't firing as well.
That's interesting. I haven't really rigorously tried that wake up and just start running.
This is the Jocko thing. And then there's this phenomenon called entrainment, where if you force yourself to exercise or eat or socialize or view bright light at a certain time of day for 3 to 7 days in a row, pretty soon there's an anticipatory circuit that gets generated. This is why anyone in theory can become a morning person to some degree or another. And this is also a beautiful example of why you wake up before your alarm clock goes off. People wake up and all of a sudden it goes off. It wasn't because it clicked, because you have this incredible timekeeping mechanism that exists in sleep. And there's some papers that have been published in the last couple of years, Nature Neuroscience and elsewhere, showing that people can answer math problems in their sleep. Simple math problems, but math problems nonetheless. This does not mean that if you ask your partner a question in sleep that they're going to answer accurately.
Like they might screw up the whole cumulative probability of 20% across multiple months.
All right, listen.
What happened?
What happened? Here's the deal. A few years back, I did a 4.5 hour, after editing, 4.5 hour episode on male and female fertility. The entire recording took 11 hours. And at one point during the, and by the way, I'm very proud of that episode. There's many couples have written to me and said they now have children as a consequence of that episode. And my first question is, what were you doing during the episode? But in all seriousness,
We should say that 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
And for people, then they should listen to the episode. It's an extremely technical episode. Like
Yeah.
You're nonstop dropping facts and referencing a huge number of papers. It must be exhausting. I don't understand how you could possibly
talks about
do that.
sperm health, spermatogenesis. It talks about the ovulatory cycle. It talks about things people can do that are considered absolutely supported by science. It talks about some of the things kind of out on the edge a little bit that are a little bit more experimental. It talks about IVF. It talks about ICSI. It talks about all of that. It talks about frequency of pregnancy as a function of age, etc. But there's this one portion in the podcast where I'm talking about the probability of a successful pregnancy as a function of age. And so there was a clip that was cut in which I was describing cumulative probability. And by the way, we've published cumulative probability histograms in many of my laboratory papers, including one that was a Nature article in 2018. So we run these all the time. And yes, I know the difference between independent and cumulative probability. Yes, it's like I do. The way the clip was cut and what I stated, unfortunately, combined to a pretty great gaffe, where I say, I said you're just adding percentages, 20 to 120%. And then I made a kind of, unfortunately, my humor isn't always so good. And I made a joke. I said 120%, but that's a different thing altogether. What I should have said was, that's impossible, and here's how it actually works. But then it continues where I then describe the cumulative probability histogram for successful pregnancy. But somewhere in the early portion, I misstated something, right? I made a math error, which implied I didn't understand the difference between independent and cumulative probability, which I do. And it got picked up and run, and people had a really good laugh with that one at my expense. And so what I did in response to it was, rather than just say everything I just said now, I just came out online and said, hey, folks, in an episode dated this on fertility, I made a math error. Here is the formula for cumulative probability, successful pregnancy at that age. Here's the graph. Here's the, and I offered it as a teaching moment in two ways. One, for people to understand cumulative probability. It was sort of interesting, too. A number of people that had come out critiquing the gaffe. Also, Anthology and folks came out pointing out that they didn't understand cumulative probability. So there was a lot of posturing. The dog pile, oftentimes people are quick to dog pile. They didn't understand, but a lot of people did understand. There's some smart people out there, obviously. I called my dad, and he was just laughing. He goes, oh, this is good. This is like the old school way of hammering academics. But the point being, it was a teaching moment. Give me an opportunity to say, hey, I made a mistake. I also made a mistake in another podcast where I did a micron to millimeter conversion or centimeter conversion. And we always correct these in the show note captions. We correct them in the audio now. Unfortunately, on YouTube, it's harder to correct. You can't go and edit in segments. We put in the captions. But that was the one teaching moment. If you make a mistake, it's substantive and related to data. You apologize and correct the mistake. Use it as a teaching moment. The other one was to say, hey, in all the thousands of hours of content we've put out, I'm sure I've made some small errors. I think I once said serotonin when I meant dopamine, and you're riffing, and it's a reminder to be careful, to edit, double check. But the internet usually edits for us, and then we go make corrections. But it didn't feel good at first, but ultimately, I can laugh at myself about it. Long ago at Berkeley, when I was TAing my first class, it was a biopsychology class. In 1998 or 1999, I was drawing the pituitary gland, which is, it has an anterior and a posterior lobe. Actually, it's a medial lobe too. I have 500-600 students in that lecture hall, and I drew a chalkboard and I drew the two lobes of the pituitary, and I said, my back was to the audience. I said, and so they just sort of hang there, and everyone just erupted in laughter because it looked like a scrotum with two testicles.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, like, oh my God, I don't think I can turn around like and face this, and I got to turn around sooner or later. So I turned around and we just all had a big laugh together. It was embarrassing. I'll tell you one thing though, they never forgot about the two lobes of the pituitary.
Yeah. And you haven't forgotten about that either.
Right. There's a high salience for these kinds of things. And it also was kind of fun to see how excited people get to see people trip. It's like an elite sprinter trips and does something stupid, like, runs the opposite direction out of the blocks or something like that. I recall at one World Cup match years ago, a guy scored against his own team. I think they killed the guy. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Some South American or Central American team.
Yeah.
And they killed the guy. But yeah, let's look it up. I just said World Cup. Yeah, he was gunned down.
Andres Escobar
Yeah.
scored against his own team in 1994 World Cup in the United States. Just 27 years old, playing for the Colombia national team.
Yeah. Last name Escobar.
Good name. I think it would protect you.
Listen, so there are some gaffes that get people killed, right? So, how forgiving are we for online mistakes? It's just the nature of the mistakes. People were quite gracious about the gaffe, and some weren't. And it's interesting that we, as public health science educators, we'll do long podcasts sometimes, and you need to be really careful. What's great is AI allows you to check these things now more readily. So that's cool. And there are ways that it's now going to be more self-correcting. I mean, I think there's a lot of errors out there on the internet, and people are finding them, and cool, like things are getting cleaned up.
Yeah, but mistakes nevertheless will happen. Are
Yeah.
you? Do you feel the pressure of not making mistakes?
Sure. I mean, I try and get things right to the best, to the best of my ability. I check with experts. It's kind of interesting when people really don't like something that was said in a podcast. A lot of times I chuckle because I'm, at Stanford we have some amazing scientists, but I talk to people elsewhere, and it's always interesting to me how I'll get divergent information, and then I'll find the overlap in the Venn diagram, and I have this question: do I just stay with the overlap in the Venn diagram? Like, I did an episode on oral health. I didn't know this until I researched that episode, but oral health is critically related to heart health and brain health. There's a bacteria that causes cavities, Streptococcus, that can make its way into other parts of the body through the mouth that can cause serious issues. There's the idea that some forms of dementia, some forms of heart disease start in the mouth, basically. I talked to no fewer than 4 dentists, dental experts, and there was a lot of convergence. I also learned that teeth can demineralize, that's the formation of cavities. They can also remineralize. As long as the cavity isn't too deep, it can actually fill itself back in, especially if you provide the right substrates for it. That saliva is this incredible fluid that has all this capacity to remineralize teeth, provided the milieu is right. Things like alcohol-based mouthwashes, killing off some of the critical things you need. It's fascinating. And I put out that episode saying, oh, well, I'm not a dentist, I'm not an oral health episode, but I talked to a pediatric dentist. There's a terrific one, Dr. Downscore Stacy, Staci, on Instagram, does great content. Talked to some others. And then I just waited for the attack. Here we go. And it didn't come. And dentists were thanking me. I was like, oh, that's a rare thing. More not if I do an episode about psilocybin or MDMA, you get some people liking it, or ADHD and the drugs for ADHD. We did a whole episode on the Ritalin, Vyvanse, Adderall stuff. You get people saying, thank you, I prescribed this to my kid and it really helped. But they're private about the fact that they do it because they get so much attack from other people. So I like to find the center of mass, report that, try and make it as clear as possible. And then I know that there's some stuff where I'm going to catch shit. What's frustrating for me is when, like, I see claims that I'm like against fluoridization of water, which I'm not, right? Like we talked about the benefits of fluoride. It builds hyper strong bonds within the teeth. I went and looked at some of the literally the crystal structure, not the crystal structure, but the essentially the like micron and submicron structure of teeth is incredible, and where fluoride can get in there and form these super strong bonds. And you can also form them with things like hydroxyapatite. And why is there fluoride in water? Well, it's the best. Okay, you say some things that are interesting, but then somehow it gets turned into like you're against fluoridization, which I'm not. Or I've been accused of being against sunscreen. I wear mineral-based sunscreen on my face. I don't want to get skin cancer. Or I use a physical barrier. There is a cohort of people out there that think that all sunscreens are bad. I'm not one of them. I'm not what's called a sunscreen truther. But then you get attacked for like, so we're talking about there are certain sunscreens that are problematic. So and Rhonda Patrick's now starting to get vocal about this. And so there's certain topics that's interesting for which you have to listen carefully to what somebody is saying, but there's a lumping as opposed to splitting of what health educators say. And so it just seems like with politics, there's this like urgency to just put people into a camp of expert versus like renegade or something. And it's not like that. It's just not like that. So the short answer is I really strive to get things right. But I know that I'm going to piss certain people off. And you've taught me. And Joe's taught me. And other podcasters have taught me that like if you worry too much about it, then you aren't going to get the newest information out there. Like peptides, there's very little human data unless you're talking about Vyleesi or the melana, stuff in the alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone stuff, which are prescribed for female libido, to enhance female libido, or sermorelin, which is for certain growth hormone deficiencies. With rare exception, there's very little human data. But people are still super interested, and a lot of people are taking and doing these things, so you want to get the information out.
Do you try to not just look at the science, but research what the communities are talking, what the various communities are talking about? Like maybe research what the conspiracy theorists are talking about, just so you know all the armies that are going to be attacking your castle.
Yes. So like, for instance, there is a community of people online that believe that like, if you consume seed oils or something, that like you're setting up your skin for sunburn. And if you don't, like there's all these like theories, but I like to know what the theories are. I like to know what the extremes are. But I also like to know what the standard conversation is. But there's generally more agreement than disagreement. I think where, I've been kind of bullish actually is, supplements. Like people go, oh, supplements. Well, there's food supplements like a protein powder, just different than a vitamin. And then they are compounds. There are compounds that have real benefit. But people get very nervous about the fact that they're not regulated. But some of them are vetted for potency and for safety with more rigor than others, and it's interesting to see how people who take care of themselves and put a lot of work into that are often attacked. That's been interesting. Also, one of the most controversial topics nowadays is Ozempic, Mounjaro. I'm very middle of the road on this. I don't understand why the quote unquote health wellness community is so against these things. I also don't understand why they have to be looked at as the only route. For some people, they really help them lose weight. And yes, there can be some muscle loss and other lean body loss, but that can be offset with resistance training. They've helped a lot of people. And other people are like, no, this stuff is terrible. I think the most interesting thing about Ozempic Mounjaro is that they are GLP-1. They're in the GLP-1 pathway, glucagon-like peptide 1. And it was discovered in Gila monsters, which is a lizard basically. And someone now the entomologist will dive on me. It's a big lizard looking thing that doesn't eat very often, and they figured out that there's this peptide that allows it to curb its own appetite at the level of the brain and the gut, and it has a lot of sequence homology to what we now call GLP-1. So I love anytime there's animal biology linked to cool human biology, linked to a drug that's powerful that can help people with obesity and type 2 diabetes, and there's evidence that can even curb some addictions. Those are newer data. But I don't see it as either or. In fact, I've been a little bit disappointed at the way that the whatever you want to call it, health, wellness, biohacking community has like slammed on Ozempic, Mounjaro. It's like they're like, just get out and run and do. Listen, there are people who are carrying substantial amounts of weight that running could injure them. They get on these drugs and they can improve, and then hopefully they're also doing resistance training and eating better, and then you're bringing all the elements together.
Well, why do you think the criticism is happening? Is it that Ozempic became super popular, so people are misusing it, or that kind of thing?
No, I think what it is that people think if it's a pharmaceutical, it's bad,
Yeah.
and then, or if it's a supplement, it's bad, depending on which camp they're in. And wouldn't it be wonderful to kind of like fill in the gap between this divide? What I would like to see in politics and in health is neither right nor left, but what we can just call a league of reasonable people that looks at things on an issue by issue basis and fills in the center. Because I think most people are I don't want to say center in a political way, but I think most people are reasonable. They want to be reasonable, but that's not what sells clicks. That's not what drives interest. But I'm a very like I look at issue by issue, person by person. I don't like in-group, out-group stuff. I never have. I've got friends from all walks of life. I said this on other podcasts, and it always sounds like a political statement. But like the push towards polarization it's so frustrating. If there's one thing that's discouraging to me as I get older each year, I'm like, wow, are we ever going to get out of this polarization? Speaking of which, how are you going to vote for the presidential election?
I'm still trying to figure out how to interview the people involved and do it well.
What do you think the role of podcast is going to be in this year's election?
I would love long form conversations to happen with the candidates. I think it's going to be huge. I would love Trump to go on Rogan. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I would love to see Joe Biden go on Joe Rogan also.
I would imagine that both would go on, but separately.
Separately, I think a debate. Joe does debates, but I think Joe at his best is one-on-one conversation, really intimate. I just wish that Joe Biden would actually do long-form conversations.
I thought he had done it. Wasn't he? I think it was on Jay Shetty's podcast.
He did Jay Shetty. He did a few, but when I mean long-form, I mean really long-form, like 2-3 hours, and more relaxed. It was much more orchestrated. Because what happens when the interview is a little bit too short, it becomes into this generic political type of NBC, CNN type of interview. You get a set of questions and you don't get to really feel the human, expose the human to the light we talked about the shadow, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I think there's something magical about 2, 3, 4 hours. But it doesn't have to be that long, but it has to have that feeling to it, where there's not people standing around and everybody's nervous and you're going to be strictly sticking to the question answer type of feel, but just shooting shit, which Rogan is the best by far in the world at that.
Yeah, I don't think people really appreciate how skilled he is at what he does. And the 3 or 4 podcasts per week, plus the UFC announcing, plus comedy tours in stadiums, plus, doing comedy shows in the middle of the week, plus a husband and a father and a friend and jiu-jitsu. The guy's got these superhuman levels of output. I agree that long form conversation is a whole other business. And I think that people want and deserve to know the people that are running for office in a different way, and to really get to know them. Well, listen, I guess is it clear that he's going to do jail time, or maybe he gets away with fine?
I would say,
Because I was going to say, does that mean you're going to be podcasting from
in prison, yeah.
jail?
We're going to. In fact, I'm going to figure out how to commit a crime so I can get in prison
Please
with
don't.
them.
Please don't. Well, I'm sure they have visitors.
That just doesn't feel an authentic way to get the interview. But yeah, I understand.
You wouldn't be able to wear that suit. You'd be wearing a different suit.
That's true.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, and you do. I'm not just saying this because you're my friend, but you would do a marvelous job. I think you should sit down with all of them separately to keep it civil, and see what happens. Here's one thing that I found really interesting in this whole political landscape. When I'm in Los Angeles, I often get invited to these, like, they're not dinners, but gatherings where, a local, bunch of podcasters will come together, but big tech, like big tech. Many people have been on this podcast. And they'll host a discussion or a debate. And what you find, if you look around the room and you talk to people, is that about half the people in the room are very left-leaning and very outspoken about that. And they'll tell you exactly who they want to see win the presidential race. And the other half will tell you that they're for the other side. A lot of people that people assume are on one side of the aisle or the other are in the exact opposite side. Now, some people are very open about who they're for, but it's been very interesting to see how when you get people one-on-one, they're like telling you they want X candidate to win or Y candidate to win. And sometimes I'm like, really? I can't believe it. Like, you? I'm like, yep. And so it's what people think about people's political leanings is often exactly wrong. And that's been eye-opening for me. And I see that university campuses too. And so it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens in November.
In addition to that, as you said, most people are close to the center, despite what Twitter makes it seem like. Most people, whether they're center left or center right, they're kind of close to the center.
Yeah, I mean, here's to me the most interesting question: who is going to be the next big candidate in years to come? Who's that going to be? Right now, I don't see or know of that person. Who's it going to be?
Yeah, the young, promising candidates, we're not seeing them. We're not seeing, like, who. Another way to ask that question: who would you want to be?
Well, that's the issue, right? Who wants to live in this 12-hour news cycle where you're just trying to, dunk on the other team so that nobody notices, like, the shit that you fucked up, like that's not only not fun or interesting, it also is just like, it's got to be psychosis inducing at some point. And I think that, God willing, we're going to, some young guy or woman is like on this and refuses to back and was just like determined to be president and will make it happen. But like, I don't even know who the viable candidates are. Maybe you, Lex, we should ask Sagar. Sagar would know.
Yeah. Maybe Sagar himself.
Sagar's show is awesome.
Yeah,
he and Crystal do a great thing.
He's incredible.
Especially since they have somewhat divergent opinions on things. Yeah, it makes it so cool.
He's great. He looks great in the suit. Looks real sexy.
He's taking real good care of himself. I think he's getting married too. Congratulations, Sagar. Forgive me for not remembering your wife, future wife's name.
He won my heart by giving me a biography of Hitler as a present.
That's what he gave you?
Yeah.
I gave you a hatchet with a poem inside.
That just shows the fundamental difference.
With a
between
poem
the
inscribed in it.
two, which was pretty damn good.
I realize everything we bring up on the screen is like really depressing, like the soccer player getting killed. Can we bring up something happy?
Sure. Let's go to Nature is Metal Instagram.
Those are pretty intense. We actually did a collaborative post on a shark thing.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of shark thing?
So to generate the Fear VR stimulus for my lab in 2016, we went down to Guadalupe Island off the coast of Mexico. Me and a guy named Michael Muller, who's a very famous portrait photographer, but also takes photos of sharks. And we used 360 video to build VR of great white sharks. Brought it back to the lab. We published that study in Current Biology. In 2017, went back down there. And that was the year that I exited the cage. You lower the cage with a crane, and that year I exited the cage. I had a whole mess with an air failure the day before. I was breathing from a hookah line while in the cage. I had no scuba on. Divers were out. The thing got boa constricted up, and I had an air failure, and I had to actually share air, and it was a whole mess. Story for another time. But the next day, because I didn't want to get PTSD, and it was pretty scary, the next day I cage exited with some other divers. And it turns out with these great white sharks, in Guadalupe, the water's very clear, and you can swim toward them, and then they'll veer off you if you swim toward them. Otherwise, they see you as prey. Well, in the evening, you've brought all the cages up, and you're hopefully all alive. And we we're hanging out fishing for tuna. We had one of the crew on board had a line in the water and was fishing for tuna for dinner, and a shark took the tuna off the line. And it's a very dramatic take, and you can see the just absolute size of these great white sharks. The waters there are filled with them. That's the one. So this video, just the Neuralink link, was shot by Matt McDougall, who is the head neurosurgeon at Neuralink. There it is. Takes it. Now, believe it or not, it looks like it missed, like it didn't get the fish. It actually just cut that thing like a bandsaw. So I'm up on the deck with Matt. Yeah. And so when you look at it from the side, you really get a sense of the girth of this freaking thing. So as it comes up, you look at the size of that thing, and they move through the water with such speed. Just a couple. So when you're in the cage and the cage is lowered down below the surface, they're going around. You're not allowed to chum the water there. Some people do it, and then when you cage exit, they're like, well, "What are you doing out here?" And then you swim toward them, they veer off. But what's interesting is that if you look at how they move through the water, all it takes for one of these great white sharks, when it sees a tuna or something it wants to eat, is like 2 flicks of the tail and becomes like a missile. It's just unbelievable economy of effort. And Ocean Ramsey, who is, in my opinion, the greatest of all cage exit shark divers, this woman who dove with enormous great white sharks, she really understands their behavior, when they're aggressive, when they're not going to be aggressive. She and her husband, Juan, I believe his name is, they understand how the tiger sharks differ from the great white sharks. We were down there basically like not understanding any of this. We never should have been there. And actually, the air failure the day before, plus cage exiting the next day, I told myself after coming up from the cage exit, that's it. I'm no longer taking risks with my life. I want to live. Got back across the border. A couple days later, I was like, that's it. I don't take risks with my life any longer. But yeah, Matt McDougall shot that video, and then it went quote unquote viral through Metal. We passed them that video.
Actually, I saw a video where an instructor was explaining how to behave with a shark in the water, and that you don't want to be swimming away because then you're acting like a prey.
That's right.
And then you want to be acting like a predator by looking at it and swimming towards it.
Right towards them, and they'll bank off. Now, if you don't see them, they're ambush predators.
Yeah.
You're swimming on the surface.
And apparently, if they get close, you should just like guide them away by like grabbing them and moving them away.
Some people will actually roll them, but if they're coming in full speed, you're not going to roll the shark. But here we are, back to dark stuff again. I like the shark attack map, and the shark attack map shows that in California there were a couple. Actually, a guy's head got taken off. He was swimming north of San Francisco. There's been a couple in Northern California. That was really tragic. But most of them are in Florida and Australia.
Florida.
So the Surfrider Foundation Shark Attack map, there it is. They have a great map.
There you go.
That's what they look like. They have all the scars on them. So if you zoom in on, look at this. If you go to North America,
Look at skulls. There's
where they're deadly attacks. But in Northern California, sadly, this is really tragic. If you zoom in on this one, I read about this. This guy, if you can click the link, 53-year-old male, he was in chest-high water. This is just tragic. I feel so sad for him and his family. He's just 3 members of the party chose to go in. He was, Jai was in his chest-high water, 25 to 50 yards from shore. Great, breached the water, seized his head, and that was it. So it does happen. It's very infrequent. If you don't go in the ocean, there's a very, very, very low probability.
But if it doesn't happen 6 times in a row,
120% chance. Yeah.
Who do you think wins, a saltwater crocodile or a shark?
Okay. I do not like saltwater crocodiles. They scare me to no end. Michael Muller, who dove all over the world, he sent me a picture of him diving with saltwater crocs in Cuba. It was a smaller one, but goodness gracious, have you seen the size of some of those saltwater crocs? Yeah. I'm thinking the sharks are so agile. They're amazing. They've head cammed one or body cammed one, moving through the kelp bed. And you look and it's just, they're so agile moving through the water, and it's looking up at the surface, like the camera's looking at the surface, and you just realize if you're out there, you're not, and you're swimming and you get hit by a shark, you're not.
I was going to talk shit and say that a salty has way more bite force, but according to the internet, recently data indicates that the shark has a stronger bite. So I was assuming that a crocodile would have a stronger bite force and therefore agility doesn't matter, but apparently a shark.
Yeah, and turning one of those big salties is probably not that. Turning around like a battleship. I mean, those sharks are unbelievable. They can hit from all sorts. Oh, and they do this thing. We saw this. You're out of the cage or in the cage, and you'll look at one, and you'll see its eye kind of like looking at you. They can't really fovea, but they'll look at you, and you're tracking it, and then you'll look down, and you'll realize that one's coming at you. They're ambush predators. They're working together. It's fascinating.
I like how you know that they can't foveate.
Right.
You're already considering the vision system
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
It's a very primitive
Eyes on
vision
the
system.
very primitive, eyes on the side of the head. Their vision is decent enough. They're mostly obviously sensing things with their electro sensing in the water, but also olfaction. Yeah, I spend far too much time thinking about and learning about the visual systems of different animals. If you get me going on this, like we'll be here all night.
See, this is what I have the smuggler dog to. I saw this in school. I got it. Because this is from a shark.
Goodness. Yet I can't say I ever saw one with teeth this big, but it's
Imagine
beautiful.
that.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's probably probably your blood pressure just goes and you don't feel a thing.
Yeah, it's not good.
Before we went down for the cage exit, a guy in our crew, Pat Dawson, who's very experienced diver, asked one of the South African divers, so what, what's the contingency plan if like somebody catches a bite? And they were like, he was like, every man for himself. And they're like, basically saying like, if somebody catches a bite, like that's it. Anyway, I thought we were going to bring up something happy.
Oh, that is happy.
Well,
Nature is beautiful.
Yeah, nature is beautiful. We lived, but there are happy things. You brought up nature is metal. This is the difference between Russian Americans and Americans. It's like maybe this is actually a good time to bring up your ayahuasca journey. I've never done ayahuasca, but I'm curious about it. I'm also curious about ibogaine, iboga. But you told me that you did ayahuasca and that for you it wasn't the dark, scary ride that it is for everybody else.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience for me. I did it twice actually.
And have you done high dose psilocybin?
Never know. I just did small dose psilocybin a couple times. So I was, nervous about it. I was very
Understandably
scared.
so. I've done high dose psilocybin. It's terrifying, but I've always gotten something very useful out of it.
So I was nervous about like whatever demons might hide in the shadow, in the Jungian shadow. Like I was nervous, but I think it turns out I don't know what the lesson is to draw from that, but my experience
Was Russian.
It must be the Russian thing. I mean, there's also something to the jungle. It strips away all the bullshit of life, and you're just there. I forgot the outside civilization exists. I forgot time because like when you don't have your phone, you don't have meetings or calls or whatever, you lose the sense of time. The sun comes up, the sun comes down.
That's the fundamental biological timer. Every mammalian species has a short wavelength. So you think like blue UV type, but like absorbing cone, and a longer wavelength absorbing cone, and it does this interesting subtraction to designate when it's morning and evening, because when the sun is low in the sky, you've got short wavelength and long wavelength light. Like when you look at a sunrise, it's got blues and yellows, orange and yellows. You look in the evening, reds, orange, and blues. And in the middle of the day, it's like full spectrum light. Now it's always full spectrum light, but because of some atmospheric elements and because of the low solar angle, you like that difference between the different wavelengths of light is the fundamental signal that the neurons in your eye pay attention to and signal to your circadian timekeeping mechanism. Like we are at the core of our brain in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. We are like wired to be entrained to the rising and setting of the sun. Like that's the biological timer, which makes perfect sense because obviously as the planets spin and revolve.
I also wonder like how that is affected by in the rainforest the sun is not visible often, so you're under the cover of the trees, so maybe that affects.
Well, there are social rhythms, there are feeding rhythms. Sometimes in terms of some species will signal the timing of activity of other species, and but yet getting out from the canopy is critical. Of course, even under the canopy during the daytime, there's far more photons than at night. You know, this is always when I'm telling people to get sunlight in their eyes in the morning and in the evening. People say, there's no light, no sunlight this time of year. I'm like, go outside on a really overcast day. It's far brighter than it is at night, right? So there's still lots of sunlight, even if you can't see the sun as an object. But I love time perception shifts. And you mentioned that in the jungle, it's linked to the rising and setting of the sun. You also mentioned that on ayahuasca, you zoomed out from the earth. These are, like, to me, the most interesting aspects of having a human brain as opposed to another brain. Of course, I've only ever had a human brain, but which is that you can consciously set your time domain window. Like we can be focused here, or we can be focused on all of Austin, or we can be focused on the entire planet. You can make those choices consciously. But in the time domain, it's hard. Like, different activities bring us into fine slicing or more broad binning of time, depending on what we're doing, programming or exercising or researching or podcasting. But just how unbelievably fluid the human brain is in terms of its the aperture of the time-space window of our cognition and of our experience. And I feel like this is perhaps one of the more valuable tools that we have access to that we don't really leverage as much as we should, which is when things are really hard, you need to zoom out and see it as one element within your whole lifespan, and that there's more to come. You know, I mean, people commit suicide because they can't see beyond the time domain they're in, or they think it's going to go on forever. When we're happy, we rarely think this is going to last forever, but which is an interesting contrast in its own right. But I think that psychedelics, while I have very little experience with them, I have some, and it sounds like they're just a very interesting window into the different apertures.
Well, how to surf that wave is probably a skill. One of the things I was prepared for, and I think is important, is not to resist. I think I understand what it means to resist a thing, a powerful wave, and it's not going to be good. So you have to be able to surf it. So I was ready for that, to relax through it. And maybe because I'm quite good at that, from knowing how to relax in all kinds of disciplines, playing piano and guitar when I was super young, and then through jiu-jitsu, knowing the value of relaxation, and through all kinds of sports, to be able to relax the body fully and just accept whatever happens to you. That process is probably why it was a very positive experience for me.
Do you have any interest in Iboga? I'm very interested in Ibogaine Iboga. There's a colleague of mine and researcher at Stanford, Nolan Williams, who's been doing some transcranial magnetic stimulation and brain imaging on people who have taken Ibogaine. Ibogaine, as I understand it, gives a 22-hour psychedelic journey where no hallucinations with eyes open, but you close your eyes and you get a very high resolution image of actual events that happened in your life, but then you have agency within those movies. I think you have to be of healthy heart to be able to do it. I think you have to be on a heart rate monitor. It's not trivial. It's not like these other psychedelics. But there's a wonderful group called Veteran Solutions that has used Iboga combined with some other psychedelics in the veterans community to great success for things like PTSD. And it's a group I've really tried to support in any way that I can, mainly by being vocal about the great work they're doing. But you hear incredible stories of people who are just like near cratered in their life, or zombied by PTSD and other things post-war, get back a lightness, or achieve a lightness and a clarity that they didn't feel they had. So I'm very curious about these compounds. The state of Kentucky, we should check this, but I believe has taken money from the opioid crisis settlement for Ibogaine research. So this is like no longer, yes, if you look here, let's see, did they do it? Oh no, oh no, they backed away.
Kentucky backs away from the plan to fund opioid treatment research.
They were going to use the money to treat opioid. Now officials are backing off. $50 billion, what, is on its way over the coming years? $50 billion.
$50 billion is on its way to state and local government over the coming years. The pool of funding comes from multiple legal statements with pharmaceutical companies that profited from manufacturing or selling opioid painkillers.
Kentucky has some of the highest number of deaths from the opioid. So they were going to do psychedelic research with Ibogaine, supporting research on illegal folks, psychedelic drug called Ibogaine. Well, I guess they backed away from it. Well, sooner or later we'll get some happy news up on the on the internet during this episode.
I'm talking about the shark and the crocodile fighting.
Yeah, that's
That
true.
was
That's true. And you survived the jungle.
Well,
And
that's the thing.
I was writing to you on WhatsApp multiple times because I was going to put it on the internet. Are you okay? And if you're like alive, and then I was going to just like put it to Twitter, just like he's alive. But then of course you're far too classy for that, so you just came back alive.
Well, jungle or not, one of the lessons is also, when you hear the call for adventure, just do it.
I was going to ask you, it's kind of a silly question, but like, give me a small fraction of things on your bucket list.
Bucket list.
Yeah.
Go to Mars.
Yeah. What's the status of that?
I don't know. I'm being patient about the whole thing.
Red Planet ran that cartoon of you guys. That was pretty funny.
It's true.
Actually, that was pretty funny. One where Goggins is already up there.
Yeah,
That's a funny one.
probably also true. I would love to die on Mars. I just love humanity reaching out to the stars and doing this bold adventure and taking big risks and exploring. I love exploration.
What about seeing different animal species? I'm a huge fan of this guy Joel Sartore, where he has this photo arc project where he takes portraits of all these different animals. If people aren't already following him on Instagram, he's doing some really important work. This guy's Instagram is amazing.
Like portraits of animals.
Well, look at it. Look at these portraits. The amount of I say personality, because we don't want to project anything onto them, but
Yeah.
the like the eyes, and he'll occasionally put a movie like this. Oh, owl! I delight in things like this. I've got some content coming on animals and animal neuroscience and eyes,
Oh,
and
dogs or all kinds.
all animals. And I'm very interested in kids content that incorporates animals. We have some things brewing there. Like I could look at this kind of stuff all day long. Look at that bat. Like bats, people think about bats as kind of like little flickering, little annoying disease carrying things. But look how beautiful that little sucker is.
How's your podcast with the Cookie Monster going?
Oh yeah, we've been in discussions with Cookie. Can't say too much about that, but Cookie Monster embodies dopamine, right? Cookie Monster wants Cookie, right? Wants Cookie right now. Like it was that one tweet. Cookie Monster, I bounce. There's cookies come from all directions. It's like it's just embodying the desire for something, and which is an incredible aspect of ourselves. The other one is, you remember a little while ago, Elmo put out a tweet. Hey, how's everyone doing out there? And it went viral. And, the Surgeon General of the United States have been talking about the loneliness crisis. He came on the podcast. And a lot of people have been talking about problems with loneliness, mental health issues with loneliness. Elmo puts out a tweet. Hey, how's everyone doing out there? And everyone gravitates toward it. So the different Sesame Street characters really embody the different kind of aspects of self through very narrow neural circuit perspective. Snuffleupagus is shy, and Oscar the Grouchy, right? And the Count, 1, 2.
The archetypes of
The archetypes
is
of
very Jungian once
right.
again.
Yeah, and I think that the creators of Sesame Street clearly either understand that or it's an unconscious genius to that. So yeah, there are some things brewing on conversations with Sesame Street characters. It's not. I know you'd like to talk to Vladimir Putin. I'd like to talk to Cookie Monster. It illustrates the differences in our sophistication or something.
Well, that's
Illustrates a lot. Yeah, illustrates a lot. But yeah, I love animation. So I'm not anime. That's not my thing, but animation. So I'm very interested in the use of animation to get science content across. So there are a bunch of things brewing. But anyway, I delight in Sartore's work, and there's a conservation aspect to it as well. But I think that mostly want to thank you for finally putting up something that where something's not being killed or let some sad outcome.
These are all really positive.
They're really cool. Really cool. And look at that mountain lion. But I also like to look at these, and some of them remind me of certain people, right? So let's just scroll through. For instance, I think when we don't try and process it too much. So okay, look at this cat, this civet cat, amazing. I feel like that's somebody. I feel like this is someone I met once. As
a
young
curiosity
and a playfulness.
Carnivore,
frontalized eyes.
found in
Very
forested
opposite depth
areas.
perception. Right. So then you go down, it's like this beautiful fish.
Neon pink.
Right.
Showing
It
off.
reminds you of some of the influencers you see on Instagram, right? Except this one's natural. Just kidding. Let's see. No
Wow.
filter.
No filter.
Yeah. Let's see. I feel like,
Bears. I'm a big fan of bears.
yeah, bears are beautiful. This one kind of reminds me of you a little bit. There's like a stoic nature to it, a curiosity. And you can kind of feel like the essence of animals. You don't even have to do psychedelics to get there.
Oh, look at that. He's like the behind the scenes of how it's actually.
Yeah. And then there's
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, in the jungle, the diversity of life was also stark.
Yeah.
From a scientific perspective, just the fact that most of those species are not identified was fascinating.
Right.
It was like every little insect is a kind of discovery.
Right. I mean, one of the reasons I love New York City so much, despite its problems at times, is that everywhere you look, there's life. It's like a tropical reef. If you've ever done scuba diving or snorkeling, you look on a tropical reef and it's like there's some little crab working on something, and like everywhere you look, there's life. In the Bay Area, if you go scuba diving or snorkeling, it's like a kelp bed. The Bay Area is like a kelp bed. Every once in a while, some big fish goes by. It's like a big IPO. But like most of the time, not a whole lot happens. Actually, the Bay Area, it's interesting as I've been going back there more and more recently. There are really cool little subcultures starting to pop up again.
Nice.
There's incredible skateboarding. The GX 1000 guys are these guys that bomb down hills. They're nuts. Like they're just going like.
So just speed, not tricks.
You guys see GX 1000. These guys going down hills in San Francisco. They are wild. And occasionally someone will get hit by a car. But if you get GX 1000, look into intersections. They have spotters. You can see someone there.
Oh, I see. There's a
Like but into traffic. Yeah, into traffic. So
in San Francisco.
yeah, this is crazy. Like this is unbelievable. And they're just wild. But in any case,
What's on your bucket list that you haven't done?
well, I'm working on a book. So I'm actually going to head to a cabin for a couple of weeks and write, which I've never done.
Mhm.
People talk about doing this, but I'm going to do that. I'm excited for that. Just the mental space of really dropping into writing.
Like Jack Nicholson in The Shining cabin?
Let's hope not.
Okay.
Let's hope not. I only started doing public facing anything for posting on Instagram in 2019, but I used to head up to Walala on the northern coast of California, sometimes by myself, to a little cabin there and spend a weekend by myself and just read and write papers and things like that. I used to do that all the time. I miss that. So some of that, I'm trying to spend a bit more time with my relatives in Argentina, relatives on the East Coast, see my parents more. They're in good health, thankfully. I want to get married and have a family. That's an important priority. I'm putting a lot of work in there.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a big one.
yeah. Putting a lot of work into the runway on that.
What's
What
your
else?
advice for people about that? Or give advice to yourself about how to find love in this world, how to build a family and get there.
And then I'll list someday and see if I hit the marks. Well, obviously pick the right partner, but also like do the work on yourself. Know yourself. the Oracle. Know thyself. And I think, listen, I have a friend. He's a new friend, but he's a friend who I met for a meal. He's a very, very well-known actor overseas, and his stuff has made it over here. And we become friends. And we went to lunch, and we were talking about work and being public-facing and all this kind of thing. And then I said, "You have kids, right?" And he says he has 4 kids. I was like, "Oh yeah, I see your post with the kids. You seem really happy." And he just looked at me, leaned in, and he said, "It's the best gift you'll ever give yourself." And he also said, "And pick your partner, the mother of your kids, very carefully." So, that's good advice excellent advice coming from somebody who's, very successful in work and family. So that's the only thing I can pass along. We hear this from friends of ours as well, but kids are amazing and family's amazing. And, that's the different people, all these people who want to like be immortal and like live to be 200 or something. There's also the old fashioned way of, having children that live on and evolve a new legacy, but they have, half your DNA. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I think you would make an amazing dad.
Thank you.
It seems like a fun thing. And, I've also gotten advice from friends who are super high performing and have a lot of kids. They'll say, just don't overthink it. Start having kids. Let's go.
Right. Well, the chaos of kids is kind of like it can either bury you or it can give you energy. But I grew up in a big pack of boys, always doing like wild and crazy things, and so that kind of energy is great. And if it's not a big pack of wild boys, it's you have daughters, and they can be different form of chaos, sometimes same form of chaos.
How many kids do you think you want?
It's either 2 or 5.
Yeah.
Very different dynamics. You're one of 2, right? You have a brother. Yeah. I'm very close with my sister. I couldn't imagine having another sibling because there's so much richness there. We talk almost every day, or 3-4 times a week. Sometimes just briefly, but we're tight. We're really look out for one another. She's an amazing person, like truly an amazing person, and has like raised her daughter in an amazing way. She's like, my niece is like gonna head to college in a year or 2, and like my sister's done an amazing job, and her dad's done a great job too. They both really put a lot into the family aspect.
Had a chance to spend time with a really amazing person in Peru in the Amazon jungle, and he is one of 20 kids. Wow! So he's got it's mostly guys. So it's just a lot of brothers, and I think 2 sisters.
I just had Jonathan Haidt on the podcast, the guy who's in the Anxious Generation, Causing the American Mind. He's great, but he was saying that in order to keep kids healthy, they need to not be on social media or have smartphones until they're 16. I've actually been thinking a lot about getting a bunch of friends onto neighboring properties. Everyone talks about this, not creating a commune or anything like that, but I think Jonathan's right. We were more like our brain wiring does best when we are raised in small village type environments where kids can forage, the whole free range kids idea. And I grew up skateboarding and building forts and dirt clod wars and all that stuff. It would be so strange to have a childhood without that.
Yeah, and I think more and more as we wake up to the negative aspects of digital interaction, we'll put value to in-person interaction. So,
it's cool to see, for instance, kids in New York City. They're just kind of moving around the city with so much sense of agency. It's really, really cool. The suburbs, like where I grew up, like as soon as we could get out, take the 7F bus up to San Francisco and hang out with, wild ones like that. While there were dangers, we couldn't wait to get out of the suburbs. The moment that, forts and dirt clod wars and stuff didn't cut it, we just like wanted into the city. So bucket list, I will probably move to a major city, not Los Angeles or San Francisco, in the next few years. New York City, potentially.
Those are all such different flavors of experiences.
Yeah. So I'd love to live in New York City for a while. I've always wanted to do that, and I will do that. I've always wanted to also have a place in a very rural area. So Colorado, Montana are high on my list right now, and to be able to pivot back and forth between the two would be great, just for such different experiences. I like a very physical life. So the idea of getting up in the sun with the sun in the Montana or Colorado type environment, and I've been putting some effort towards finding a spot for that. And New York City, to me, I know it's got its issues, and people say it wasn't what it was. Okay, I get it, but listen, I've never lived there, so for me, it'd be entirely new. And Schulz seems full of life.
There's an energy to that city, and he represents that. There's and the full diversity of weird that is represented in New York City is great.
Yeah, you walk down the street, there's like a person with like a cat on their head, and no one gives a shit.
Yeah, that's great.
Right. San Francisco used to be like that. The joke was like, you have to be naked and on fire in San Francisco before someone takes it. But now it's changed. But again, recently I've noticed that San Francisco, it's not just about skateboarders. There's some community houses of people in tech that are super interesting. There's some community housing of people not in tech that I've learned about and known people that live there, and it's cool. Like there's stuff happening in these cities that's new and different. That's what youth is for. They're supposed to evolve things out.
So amidst all that, you still have to get shit done. I've been really obsessed with tracking time recently, like making sure I have daily activities, I have habits that I'm maintaining, and very religious about making sure I get shit done.
Do you use an app or something like that?
No, just Google Sheets. So basically a spreadsheet, and I'm tracking
Mhm.
daily, and I write scripts that whenever I achieve a goal, it glows green.
Yeah. Do you track your workouts and all that kind of stuff too?
Yeah. Just the fact that I got the workout done.
Yeah.
So it's a check mark thing. So I'm really, really big on making sure I do a thing. It doesn't matter how long it is. So I have a rule for myself that I do a set of tasks for at least 5 minutes every day. And it turns out that many of them I do way longer, but just doing it, I have to do it every day. And there's currently 11 of them. And it's just a thing. Like one of them is playing guitar, for example. So do you do that kind of stuff? Do you do like daily habits?
Yeah, I do. My I wake up, if I don't feel I slept enough, I do this non-sleep deep rest yoga nidra thing that I've talked about a bunch. We actually released a few of those tracks as audio tracks on Spotify. 10-minute, 20-minute ones. Puts me back into a state that feels like sleep, and I feel very rested. Actually, Matt Walker and I are going to run a study. He's just submitted the IRB to run a study on NSDR and what it's actually doing to the brain. There's some evidence of increases in dopamine, et cetera, but those are older studies, still cool studies. But so I'll do that, get up, hydrate, and if I've got my act together, push some caffeine down, like some Matina, some coffee, maybe another Matina, and resistance train 3 days a week, run 3 days a week, and then take 1 day off. And like to be done by 8:39. And then I want to get into some real work. I actually have a sticky note on my computer. It's like just like reminding me how good it feels to accomplish some real work. And then I go into it right now. It's the book writing, researching a podcast, and just fight tooth and nail to stay off social media, text message, WhatsApp, YouTube, all that. Get something done.
How long can you go? Can you go like 3 hours? Just deep focus?
If I hit a groove, 90 minutes to 3 hours if I'm really in a groove. It's tough.
Yes, for me, I start the day actually. That's why I'm afraid. I really prize those morning hours. I start with the work.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to hit the 4 hour mark of deep focus.
Great. I love it.
And often
Calendar
can't.
report.
Yeah,
Report.
I'm really, really
Right, shit.
believe.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
often torture, actually. It's really, really difficult.
Oh yeah, the agitation. But I sat across the table from you a couple years ago when I was out here in Austin doing some work, and I was working on stuff you were, and I noticed you just like stare at your notebook sometimes, just like pen at the same position, and then you'll get back into it. Like there are those moments you're building that hydraulic pressure, and then go. Yeah, I try and get something done of value. Then the communications start, and talking to my podcast producer. My team is everything. I mean, like the magic potion in the podcast is Rob Moore, right? Who's has been in the room with me every single solo. Costello used to be in there with us, but that's it. People have asked, journalists have asked, can they sit in? Friends have asked. Nope, just Rob. And for guest interviews, he's there as well. And I talk to Rob all the time. All the time. We talk multiple times per day. And in life, I've made some errors in certain relationship domains in my life in terms of partner choice and things like that. And certainly don't blame all of it on them, but I've played my role. But in terms of picking business partners and friends, like to work with, I mean, it's been bullseyes, and it's just Rob has been amazing. Mike Blayback, our photographer, and the guys I mentioned earlier, like we just communicate as much as we need to, and we pour over every decision with like near neuroticism before we put anything out there. And
so including like even creative decisions of like topics to cover, all of that.
Yeah, like a photo for the book jacket the other day. Mike shoots photos, and then we look at them, we pour over them together. Logo for the Perform podcast with Danny Galpin that we're launching. Like, is that the right contour? Mike's he's got the aesthetic thing because he was at DC so long as a portrait photographer. And he was close friends with Ken Block, to Jim Connor, like all the car jumping in the city stuff. Like, I mean, Mike is a master. He's a true master of that stuff. And we just pour over every little decision. But even with sponsors, there are dozens of ads now. By the way, that whole Jazzerciser thing of me saying, a guy went from a 2 to a 7. I never said that. That's AI. Like I would never call a number off somebody, a 2 to a 7. Are you kidding me? It's crazy. So is AI. If you bought the thing, I'm sorry. But like our sponsors, we list the sponsors that we have and why on our website. And like the decision, do we work with this person or not? Do we still like the product? I mean, we've got ways with sponsors because of like changes in the product or change, most of the time it's amicable, all good. But like just every detail, and that just takes a ton of time and energy. But I try and work mostly on content, and my team's constantly trying to keep me out of the other discussions. Because I obsess. But you have to have a team of some sort, someone that you can run things by.
For sure, but one of the challenges, the larger the team is, and I'd like to be involved in a lot of different kinds of stuff, including engineering stuff, robotics work, research. All of those interactions, at least for me, take away from the deep work, the deep focus.
Right.
Unfortunately, I get drained by social interaction, even with the people I love and really respect and all that kind of stuff.
You're an introvert.
Yeah, like fundamentally an introvert. So to me, it's a trade-off, getting shit done versus collaborating. And I have to choose wisely, because without collaboration, without a great team, which I'm fortunate enough to be a part of, I think you wouldn't get anything really done. But as an individual contributor to get stuff done, like to do the hard work of researching or programming, all that kind of stuff, you need the hours of deep work.
I used to spend a lot more time alone. That's on my bucket list. Spend a bit more time dropped into work alone. I think social media like causes our brain to go the other direction. I try and answer some comments and then get back to work.
I'm really, after Go to the Jungle, I appreciate not using the device. I played with the idea of like spending maybe like 1 week a month not using social media at all.
Mm-hmm. I use it just to have morning block. I'll eat some lunch and I'll usually do something while I'm doing lunch or something, and then a bit more work, and that real work, deep work, and then around 2:30 I do a non-sleep deep rest, take a short nap, wake up, boom, maybe a little more caffeine, and then lean into it again. And then I find if you really put in the deep work, 2 or 3 bouts per day, by about 5 or 6 p.m. it's over. I was down at Jocko's place not that long ago, and in the evening did a sauna session with him and some family members of his and some of their friends. And it's really cool. Like they'll all work all day and train all day, and then in the evening they get together and they sauna and cold plunge. I'm really into this whole thing of gathering with other people at a specific time of day. I have a gym in my house, and I Tim will come over and train, or that we've kind of slowed that down in recent months. But I think gathering in groups once a day, being alone for part of the day, it's like very fundamental stuff. We're not saying anything that hasn't been said millions of times before, but how often do people actually do that? And call the party, like be the person to like bring people together if it's not happening. That's something I've really had to learn, even though I'm an introvert. Like, hey, like gather people together. You came through town the other day, and a lot of people at the house. It was rad. Actually, it was funny because I was getting a massage when you walked in. I don't sit around getting massages very often, but I was getting one that day. And then everyone came in, and the dog came in, and like everyone piled in. It was very sweet.
Again, no devices, but choose wisely the people you gather with.
Right. And I was close.
Thank you for clarifying. I wasn't, which is very weird. The friends you surround yourself with. That's another thing. It's like I understood that from ayahuasca and from just the experience in the jungle. Is like just select the people. Just be careful how you allocate your time. I just saw on somewhere Conor McGregor has this good line. I wrote it down about loyalty. He said, "Don't eat with people you wouldn't starve with." That guy's, he's big on loyalty. All the shit talk, all of that, set that aside.
That's hilarious.
To me, like, loyalty is really big. Because then if you invest in certain people in your life and they stick by you and you stick by them, and what else is life about?
Yeah, well, hardship will show you who your real friends are. That's for sure. And, we're fortunate to have a lot of them. It'll also show you who really, like, has put in the time to try and understand you and understand people. Like, people are complicated. I love that. So can you read the quote once more?
Don't eat with people you wouldn't starve with. Yeah, so in that way, hardship is a gift.
Oh, you little bitch.
It shows you, definitely. And it makes you stronger. It definitely makes you stronger.
Let's go get some food.
Yeah, you're 1 meal a day guy.
Yeah.
I actually ate something earlier, but it was like a protein shake and a couple pieces of biltong. I hope we're eating a steak.
So I hope so too. I'm full of nicotine and caffeine.
Yeah. What do you think? How do you feel?
I feel good.
Yeah. I was thinking you'd probably like. I only did a half a piece. I won't have more for a while, but
A little too good.
yeah.
Thank you for talking once again, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lex. Been a great ride, this podcast thing, and you're the reason I started the podcast. You inspired me to do it. You told me to do it, did it, and you've also been an amazing friend. You showed up in some very challenging times, and you've shown up for me publicly. You've shown up for me in my home, in my life, and it's an honor to have you as a friend. Thank you.
I love you, brother.
Love you too.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Andrew Huberman. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, let me leave you with some words from Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, you will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time.
Can you have a conversation with an AI where it feels like you talk to Einstein or Feynman, where you ask them a hard question, they're like, I don't know. And then after a week, they did a lot of
Disappear
research
and come back. Yeah.
and they come back and just blow your mind. If we can achieve that amount of inference compute, where it leads to a dramatically better answer as you apply more inference compute, I think that would be the beginning of like real reasoning breakthroughs.
The following is a conversation with Aravind Srinivas, CEO of Perplexity, a company that aims to revolutionize how we humans get answers to questions on the internet. It combines search
Excellent.
and
Hey, I'll be
large
there in
language
just a
models,
second.
LLMs, in a way that produces answers where every part of the answer has a citation to human-created sources on the web. This significantly reduces LLM hallucinations and makes it much easier and more reliable to use for research and general curiosity-driven late-night rabbit hole explorations that I often engage in. I highly recommend you try it out.
It's
Aravind
11:52
was
p.m.
previously
It's
a
as late
PhD.
here as it is in Vancouver. Fuck yeah, man. Hey, just one moment. People have been really mean to me today, so I'm really glad that you guys are here. Just one moment. Yeah, just over bullshit, and I don't like it. Like being mean, but I'm about to fuck them. This is what's really exciting to me. How are they being mean? Just a moment. I'll explain. Yes. Perfect.
I'm making a lot of profit and overspending, to be honest. I mean, taking profits is good, but I hope you haven't suing you too early. You didn't sell your suing too early, did you?
Perfect. Hey guys, I'm ready to. I'll be ready to play in just a second. I just have to use the restroom, and then
I've been
I'll be
taking a
right
lot of profit and spending on stupid shit, which was not a good idea, but better than losing it. Oh, really? What did you spend it on? Just overspending on women. Like brothel shit. Nah, just dates. Really, what kind of exotic woman are you dating that require high maintenance women like hot makeup? Shit. Really, very that shit is you're not even spending it on yourself. I am spending it on myself. Well, I'm planning to. I'm planning to go to the U.S. In late December, after Christmas, early January. Planning to go to U.S. But I've just been blowing fucking ton of money on just stupid fucking women. Well, not stupid women, just women that don't really like. Okay. Tell me about your project that you want. Because of your project. It went to 84k market cap and then it died. That's 17k now. There's a meme coin. Yeah. 84k market cap and it died. You didn't rug it. I didn't rug it, just went to shit. Well, you can always try again. You want Sui? Look, when Sui takes off, people. You guys take it off, isn't it? Or you think Sui's just getting started? There's no use in Sui. What does Sui actually do that's really good in it? What do you mean? I've heard it's like an amazing blockchain for that. I don't know. It's more cost efficient and then faster than Solana.
Okay. Oh, apologies. You were talking.
It's just more. It's just like so. The iPhone 5 is not as going to be as fast as the iPhone 6. It came out in 2023, so it's more advanced. So it's more advanced. Solana came out in 2020, so it's going to be slower because it came out later. I don't know if
That doesn't make any sense.
necessarily valid that you can upgrade.
Exactly.
To upgrade a network than it is to build a new one.
I'm gonna send you guys the invites right now. I'm very happy you're here. Welcome, Frosty. How you living, pimp?
Yeah, what's up?
All right, I don't think so. Every time we talk. Oh, that's right. Okay. You have it? You have Play-Doh installed, Frosty?
Yeah, I don't want to play that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Absolutely. Okay, so I was saying that I was sending invites, and I know that Riser got yours. Zoot, are you?
Just give me 2 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay.
2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, sure. Okay, so I was saying that people were being mean to me. Yeah. It's I don't really know why people don't like me online for a lot of reasons, especially on Discord, because one of the big ones is when you read my profile, it looks like I'm a bot, and I'm not. I mean, I'm a real person, but they just automatically will ban me from places. Anyway, there's this one Discord two that I've been a member of, which I've been a member for a long time, but I don't really participate. And they're the Wall Street Bets group. And I went into one of the Wall Street Bets. All I did was say, "Hi, how is everyone today?" And I got banned. Like literally, like that's I can't believe it. Then this other group I go into, this other one, I'm like, "Hey, I go into one of the chats and I talk to them, like which I don't always do, but I'm like, "Hey, how do you turn on your camera?" They're like, "Hey, it's that alphabet person." I'm like, "Excuse me?" They're like, "Yeah, you stupid trans." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, why are you being so mean? Why are you being so mean?" I mean, like my idea of trans, my
Like this stuff is contained in USA. It's contained there, so it's like
okay, Frosty.
I don't know what would happen if it was everywhere.
I understand. No, I get that. And I'm like, so because I think that transhumanism is not transsexuality, but transhumanism, the fact that we can upload our minds and perhaps be able to live a digital immortality, I don't want that to essentially get in my way sexually, but I love fucking chicks and I've never fucked a dude or been fucked by a dude. You're telling me like you're just gonna straight up hate on me now? And so the last like 2 hours I've been in an all out battle with these
Yeah,
motherfuckers.
like sometimes I get a bit lonely on Twitch. Like I get a bit bored on Twitch sometimes, like the dates, for example. But
Right,
the
so
important
go.
thing to note is that like they're kind of on me because like
Riser.
You influence people a lot.
Riser, go. And Zoot, if you
Yeah, but I don't know if you knew that, but
okay, what happened, Riser?
yeah, but I don't know if you know that, but I just want to tell you it.
Frosty, just be quiet for a second, please.
Alright.
Riser, what happened? Okay, it shows you're in the game. You're not playing. Yeah, it's your turn. Or, well, it was. Okay, I'll send new ones. Okay, Riser and Zoot, I'm sending you new invitations. It should be that black blue.
The best shot ever on that game.
All right, well, there's nothing we can really do about it at this point. Okay, so Riser, you're up. It's the Black Lagoon. Okay, apologies, Frosty. What were you saying?
Yeah, Rabbi, so I need you to listen like kind of closely on this matter. It's sort of like, if you influence people to act outrageously, they kind of go after you online. You can never use that here. Yeah. I don't know how you're influencing people just by being like that, but they do that. People, especially me.
Okay.
I'm in trouble here. And like it's also all that back and shit. Like I'm not into all this also the whack. Like what the heck? No. But anyways, I just like come to have fun and stuff. So I'll go mess with trips too. Any inappropriate behavior is considered to be influencing people, and most likely they say something like the devil in this situation is it's thing. Yeah, but that's pretty much what it is. It's like the devil in your friend circle. Go find it somewhere you might find it. I don't know.
Okay. Riser, that was a really good shot. That was really good. Unless you were Caspian Sea. Caspian Sea, this is his bread and butter. Oh, that was a beautiful shot.
Have you heard the term young kid that's
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just I don't want people to be mean to me. So anyway, um, I was like, look, okay. I even said to them, "Will you? I'm gonna go in the other VC. Will you please stop being mean to me?" And they're like, "No." So then they go into the VC and they keep kicking me out, thinking it's funny. So what I do is, oh, go. Oh, that's like the perfect shot. So what I did is I built a robot that every time they kick me out, it just automatically lets me back in. So they are just having to have like a one man or like a group fight over kicking me out. And whenever they kick me out, I just come right back.
Yeah, I mean, like the stuff you see on YouTube and stuff is like people who act outrageously, but then other people act inappropriately. They go after them. So it's like a thing with them. I don't know what it is, but it's just I don't know. Any toxic behavior is considered. Yeah, it's pretty much what it is. Like they're the ones calling out toxic behavior and stuff.
Man, you two keep
But
fucking.
I mean, I don't
Oh,
see how all these
Riser.
could be LGBT. It doesn't make sense. Internet culture, this, that, Discord is practically the eye of Sauron also.
Oh, beautiful shot, Zoot. Beautiful shot, Zoot. Riser, not how.
This is a mirror. I can see that too. Thank you.
Oh
Look,
man,
I'm gonna bring this back.
Alright, I'll see you guys later.
take
Have
care,
my
Frosty.
peace of mind.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks for your
Don't try
advice.
to patronize them.
Thanks for your advice, Frosty.
They'll up your value.
I have a feeling Rise is going to do that vertical shot here.
That's a good one.
They have way too much faith.
I've got a very difficult shot.
Yes, I did.
Now,
I mean,
those
mine
ones,
not really up badly. I have a feeling we get this in.
No way from that angle.
Adam, and Verizon has the easiest shot out of all three of us.
Ooh.
And he's still shot.
I hate these old bricks.
Rabbi's got an easy shot. Holy shit, that was nearly perfect. Not as perfect as that. And Bryce's pulled 0 again. Rabbi's pulled the first.
Why do you get a lead? Too?
You can make it. Hey, Rabbi, do you think there's any chance I can come back?
Yeah, there is. It's not super likely,
So
but
you never did we? Oh yeah, no, we did play the Halloween Horror Fears like one time.
Zoo keeps thinking that they're gonna be holiday maps, but I thought there would be, but apparently no.
Where's
What's
the
up,
Thanksgiving?
It's not December yet.
Yeah, I still think they'd put them out by now.
Oh yeah, they put it out like a month before Halloween, right? So it should probably be out now for maybe Christmas.
I think so. Wow, you guys really fucked me here. Oh, what a great shot.
Dude, where are you gonna go in
You're gonna hit the ball at time. California. Any particular place?
Oh, what a great shot. What a great shot.
Oh, there we go.
Did you guys see that blue orb at Manchester Airport?
I don't know where. Oh, on Twitter, it was like nothing. It was like, because it's in like a drone. Oh, is it a bad show? Yeah. Those are both in the pink. You're both deep in the pink. Oh,
That's where I like to be, baby. Deep in the pink. Oh,
incredibly off the radar.
that's not what I wanted.
Incredibly off the radar.
No. This is going to be like the tortoise and the hare. And Zoot's just... Oh, what a great shot.
Is anyone trying to get away on the left?
No, I don't understand that route. I don't even know how you get all the way over there. All right, you want another?
Where in California is he? Are you gonna?
Oh, no. Wow, you guys just keep fucking me.
Jay, that would have been shot right. Played this whole last.
I know.
Okay, that would have been terrible. Okay. Right back.
Yo, dog.
I think I know what to do. And you're not gonna like it.
Let's see it. No, I'm not. That was perfect. That was absolutely perfect. What? That was right.
You just helped me. You gave me a chance. But
Wow, looks like we're getting shut out, Zoo. Oh,
that was close. That was so close. Oh, you could do this in two shots.
riser.
No,
Riser.
you could do it. You could do it in the next shot. No, it's like impossible. Actually, no. Ready for the greatest shot. Well done.
As I just fucked up my shot, so please knock my ball away.
Have the worst shot.
No,
Wow, he
fucking do that.
fucked you.
Oh, perfect shot. Perfect shot. What a shot. Dude, I freaking handed you this one silver platter.
I told you you could do it. Take off.
You could have freaking got it in. Why would you do that?
Because I didn't want you to get it in. You have the lead.
Touche. No, Zoot's gonna have to.
Yeah, but you and I both know that that's not as difficult. He takes more risks, if we were to call it that. Oh, stop. Stop. Oh, wow. Is that a perfect shot? Let's see here. Oh,
Wow, that would have been.
this is a difficult hole for me. Oh, that is a good shot.
Oh,
It's finicky,
predictable tree down.
right? Sometimes you get it and it puts you in a perfect spot. Zoot, you're up, big dog. Oh, look at this shot. That's okay.
But yes, tree down.
Oh, now that's not what you wanted to do. Take out that tree, dog. Oh no.
You could possibly get a double water pump dude, if you just want to spin it.
No way.
Double water pump.
Oh, what a great shot. Water. Oh, nice shot.
Can't believe Zoo got it.
Zoot with the lead.
Waste an entire minute.
Zoot, what are you doing, dog? Go. Zoot, are you there?
Yeah.
That's an okay shot.
Great.
I love how Zoo hasn't changed it a bit, but still waste the entire shot clock.
Right. Oh, that's a very good shot.
That was a terrible shot.
Very good.
No, it's terrible. Look, there's no way he can get it out. Right? Crap. Bravo, why the fuck did you do that?
Just blast it.
That was bad.
Oh, what a beautiful shot.
That was bad.
Oh, what What a shot. Zoot, that was great.
What? How did both of you get out?
Great shot.
You're a shot in front of me though. Rabbi's going to get it in, and I have no chance to get it in. Unless Rabbi misses, which I don't think he will.
Did you both make it out separately?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was a shot behind, so it doesn't matter.
This fool eats me alive every time.
Oh, that's a good shot.
And not that chicken.
I always fuck that up. Oh no.
You could have gone through the chicken.
I know.
Oh,
Easy shot, easy shot, easy shot.
oh my God. Wow.
Rabbi, easy shot. Yes,
Wow.
a draw.
Zoot and Rabbi won. I can't believe how good Riser played and has 0 wins. Riser is
I missed 2 shots.
a major. He's an excellent player. So
I have 163 games of mini golf one.
Riser's pretty close with that. Oh no. Riser, how many do you have?
I only had 150 wins. It feels like I should be at like 3,000.
That's right. It was
How many games
150.
do you play?
I'll be the shit.
189.
Okay, so it's like nearly 50% chance of winning.
Riser's really good at this hole.
Pretty good ratio. Oh no. That's good. Not calibrated.
How did we do the same shot?
I did not calibrate the arrows.
Oh, that